and county, the county and city engineer will provide an update on the Arboretum Area Transportation Plan Study. This is the Highway 5 corridor study from the Arboretum to the DQ in Victoria, and I believe it also includes Rolling Acres Road and 82nd Street? Yes. Okay. Finally, as you know, we are in our 2020 budget process, which started in June. The council will have a budget workshop on Tuesday, November 12th at 5 p.m. We're meeting on Tuesday as the city offices are closed in honor of Veterans Day, which is on a Monday, so please make note of that. The council will also have a budget workshop on Monday, November 25th at 5 p.m. And finally, the council is considered to consider adoption of the 2020 budget and 5-year CIP or capital improvement plan at the regular council meeting on Monday, December 16th. And that concludes our announcements. And with that, we're going to, instead of doing the general open forum, at this point, we're going to go ahead and, Dee Dee, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Please, for the record, your name and title for the public.
Good evening. I'm Dee Dee Caring. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations for Eastern Carver County Schools. Mayor Funk, council members, thank you so much for providing me an opportunity to be here tonight. I'm really excited to be able to provide some factual information about our November 5th referenda. As Mayor Funk mentioned, we do have a school board meeting tonight that myself, including Clint Christopher, he's unable to be here tonight this evening, but we do have some other members with us. So with me tonight is Chris Henches from Teaching and Learning, Jill Velour, the principal at Victoria Elementary, and then Ron Meyer from our school board. So again, as you mentioned, we'll briefly go through some information and then show a short video and then take a couple questions if you have from the council, but then we need to leave. So there's been a lot of misinformation in the community, and while we would love to present the full presentation, we only have time for a short time tonight. But I'd appreciate the opportunity to provide you with a clear look at the issues that the district is facing. Like you, we are regulated by statutes, by regulations and policies, and take very seriously our moral, ethical, and legal obligation to provide the taxpayers in our community with accurate information about what happens if the referenda passes or if it fails. We cannot and do not advocate for the referenda. We are not the Yes Committee. We are information only. We provide that so our residents can make informed decision on November 5th. So we are a growing district. I expect as a council you've looked at the growth data for Victoria, which closely resembles the data we've received from our demographers. We know that the other 3 cities which we serve have substantial projections as well. City of Chaska provided us information that they have 1,147 residential plats planned in the next 5 years. Carver has 813 residential plans either partially built or planned since opening Carver Elementary. And Chanhassen projects an estimated 800 residential plats in the next 5 years in our school district. These 3 cities alone have over 2,700 new residential plats. This referenda asks for what the district needs to meet that growth and continue to deliver quality education for our kids as they deserve it and this community expects it. If you have had additional questions after we leave tonight, please don't hesitate to call me so we can work through them together. So let's get started. You should have received a document, a 2-page summary in your packet. That's what I'll be kind of going over. Did you get that in your packet? If not, I can have paper copies. Would you prefer some paper copies? I can do that real quick.
It's on screen.
Yeah.
You got it on the screen?
We got it.
Okay. All right. So at the top of the document, you'll notice that there's 3 questions. So 3 questions we get asked, why 3? And I know that can be confusing, but because they come from different funding sources, we are required to have them separate. All 3 questions are related to each other in that they support the district's work to manage growth and sustain the community's investment in our schools. Question 1 is an operating referenda that would increase funding by $550 per student for $5.6 million per year. There is an inflation factor on that question. The operating levy would help the district manage growing enrollment, maintain class sizes, present cuts to programs and services, and to continue the excellent academic preparation of our students. This investment in our schools for the average property taxpayer is a $22 a month increase in property taxes. Question 2 is a 20-year, $111.6 million bond referenda. It is to build a new 610 elementary school for district-owned property in Chaska. Land was purchased with funds from the 2015 referendum, anticipating a new elementary school needed around the 2022 school year. It also would address deferred maintenance district-wide and a larger bus garage to better serve our community. Question 3 is a technology and security levy. It's a renewal. It is a no tax increase. It's for $4.4 million a year for 10 years. This investment is more than Chromebooks for kids. It's school security, both cyber security and physical security. Technology infrastructure and bandwidth is included in that. Learning devices for our students and for our staff, and professional development for our staff as how to integrate technology into the classroom. In the middle section of that document, you will see a rundown of the things you need to know, and I encourage you to check it out. It's in this section in here. So one question we often get is about enrollment. As I mentioned earlier, there are over 27 new housing planned, single-family homes planned in Chaska, Carver, and Chanhassen alone, not to mention Victoria. If you drive anywhere on the west side of the community, you will see construction going on. The 1,400 students we refer to is total students of this largest portion is elementary, with just about 800 new kindergarten through grade 5 students. Adequate funding and classroom space helps maintain class size to support personalized learning for all students. Another question we often get is why Victoria Elementary is running out of space when we just added 5 classrooms with the last referendum. Victoria Elementary School was built with 3 preschool classes built in that. As that school grew and we ran out of space, the preschool program had to move out, and we used those classrooms for kindergarten. Once the construction was done, and the plan was always there, was to put preschool back into that school. Parents want preschool in their elementary school. Kids have an easier transition moving from preschool to kindergarten. So 3 preschool classrooms go back in, a new net of 2 additional classrooms. Not to mention the growth we're seeing. I talked to Jill Valor, we get about 45 new students a year in that particular school. We also changed the boundaries for Victoria, so that lowered the number of students that were going there. We changed that up at the last referenda as well. So on to a little bit about the deferred maintenance part of the question. While Victoria Elementary is relatively new school, some of our buildings are much older, and they are in need of funds to support large projects for renovations. Most of this is in boilers, ventilation, cooling, electrical, and lighting. So now if we flip over to page 2 of the document, you'll see a little chart on the upper left-hand corner. So in that is the operating levy per pupil unit. Not to be confused that that's the tax that we're imposing, but rather that is the operating referenda per student. If you can see right now, Eastern Carver County Schools is on kind of the bottom right side of the 14 school districts that we've been comparing ourselves to for a number of years. And on the left-hand side, if it were to pass, we would be somewhere between Edina and Eden Prairie. So not at the top, and still a little bit better than where we're at today. On the right-hand side on that top, you'll see that community supports our schools. This is done by a scientific survey by Morris and Leatherman, just indicating that our school communities really do value our schools, and they appreciate what we are doing in our schools. Information on the bottom right is all the polling information. I encourage you and your residents to look at that. Some of the polling locations have changed. There's only 4 polling locations on that right side, and they want to know that. Additionally, we do offer polling currently. It's open at the District Education Center. We have election judges there, and it's just like a little small polling location. You can vote there. That is open Monday through Friday from 8 to 4:30. And then there's some extended hours for those that can't get there during that time, and that's Thursday, October 24th from 8 to 7, and Saturday, October 26th from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Then at the bottom left-hand side, you can see the tax impact. So the tax impact on a $350,000 home, that's the average priced home that we receive that information from the county. So in question 1, it's $22 a month. Question 2 is $14 a month, and question 3 is a 0 increase on that question. On our district webpage, you can go to the webpage, and under the referenda category, you can find a place where you can get the tax calculator for your particular property, whether it's residential, commercial, or apartment, or agricultural. And then finally, just a few notes about what happens if it doesn't pass. So we would need to cut at least $4.5 million in cuts in the next school years. We have made substantial cuts in other areas in the past, keeping it away from the classroom. But if it doesn't pass, we would need to impact class size. We would have to have staff reductions, which includes staff means all employees, not just teachers, but teachers and custodians and paraprofessionals, etc. It would impact student learning. It would eliminate some student activities and programs. And then crowding our schools, if there's not further space, would also be impacted not only by the increase in class size that we would be imposing with a cut, but we would also have to increase class size because of just the physical space is not there. We would also see deteriorating buildings and a negative impact on our security and technology. So with that, if we could turn on the video, and hopefully it all works for you, and then I'd be happy to take a couple questions.
We hear time and time again, people love our schools, and we're really proud of that, and we're really proud of the service that we can provide to our students and the great facilities that we have here.
It's really about honoring each individual student and their experiences and what they bring, and then supporting them to the next level. It's high achievement through that personalized learning.
I love to be able to ask the boys at the end of the day how their day was, because I know 99% of the time it's coming back with good feedback, and it's because of where they are, the people they surround themselves with, the way they're treated by the faculty and staff. It's very easy for us to sleep at night knowing that every day we're sending them to a very good place.
Families seek out the high-quality education we provide and continue to move here into new and existing homes. A recent demographic study projected that 1,400 more students would enroll in Eastern Carver County schools in the next 5 years, with most of them at the elementary level.
When you break that down, that's about one classroom per month. We are seeing a lot of young families coming in, and they want to make sure that they have a great opportunity for their children to learn, to grow, and to be successful.
On November 5th, Eastern Carver County School District residents will be asked to vote on 3 school funding requests. These requests would address academic needs, budget pressures, growing enrollment, aging buildings, school security, and technology. Question 1 is for an operating levy increase to continue the strong academic preparation of our students, prevent cuts to programs and services, maintain class sizes, and manage growing enrollment.
It's really important to me to have one-on-one time with students, or even small groups with students, just so I can get to know them, know what motivates them, what they need, and then they don't get lost in the shuffle of the rest of your students.
Every teacher that I've had in this district has been willing to take the time out of their already so busy day to talk to me about things that are about me learning and growing as a student and as an individual.
What we're doing with personalized learning has been recognized across the country and across the globe in some respects, but that takes investment, that takes commitment, that takes training and tools, and those are the things we need to support.
Question 2 is for bond funds to build a new elementary school, address deferred maintenance across the district, and build a larger bus garage.
So the facility task force did look at both adding on to 3 schools versus a new building. Adding on to the 3 schools is more expensive than it is to build a new school. Over the last 9 years, we have spent about $20 million in deferred maintenance, and we have been maintaining our our schools. We're just at a point with some of our older buildings that they have such great needs to do the major infrastructure, whether it's HVAC or it's the ventilation system, all of that requiring a lot more dollars to make that work for that particular school.
As we look at the bus facility, it was really originally designed for 50 buses, and we have over 100, and we'll continue to grow. The physical building itself has one mechanics bay, so as our fleet has gotten larger, there's just not the physical space we need for those to maintain and operate them effectively.
Question 3 is a no tax increase renewal of an existing levy for security and technology.
Investing in security is an important aspect for the district, but it's more important for our students. It's really about providing a safe and secure environment that students can come into, feel safe and secure, and be able to sit down and learn.
If voters approve all 3 questions, the tax impact on the average homeowner would be about $36 per month.
But we want to ensure that we're protecting our investment for the long haul, and that the environment that we create for our students is just as positive today as 20 years from now.
What we are asking for is really only what we need to be a district of choice and be a district that everyone can be proud to send their children to.
To learn more about the requests, please visit the district website. And remember to vote on November 5th.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Council? No? Go ahead.
Yes.
These are, I'm just trying to understand this for my own purposes.
Sure.
The preschool issue with Victoria Elementary, where you've moved the preschoolers out and now
Yeah.
you want to bring them back?
They already are back.
They're already back?
Yep.
Okay. So we need to add a room because they're back. And
Say that again. I'm
are
sorry.
we spending additional money on Victoria Elementary?
Not in this bond
Okay,
referendum.
okay,
No, not at all.
It was-
No,
Okay.
no. Those classrooms were there. They were built when the school was originally built. Yeah. If it gets too crowded, we would have to find another location for preschool because we want kindergarten or first grade to be in there. Yep.
So the $550 per pupil increase.
Yes.
So if it's increasing $550, what is the base that you're looking at today? What's your cost per pupil today?
On average, an average cost to educate a student is around $12,000 a year.
Okay,
Yep.
so it's
Yep.
550 on 12,000.
Well, yes, but we've been overspending. Our revenue has not kept up with our expenses because the state of Minnesota has not provided annual cost of living increases on top of that. So part of this is to make up for the shortfall that we've had through state funding and state aid as well. And that's districts across the whole state. It's not just Eastern Carver County schools.
So if the cost, are you finished? I'm sorry.
So just one further question.
Sure.
And, I'm sorry, the busing.
Yeah.
Did I hear that the busing used to be outside the school district and you're pulling it in or have pulled it in?
We're working on that. The board has approved bringing busing, insourcing it instead of outsourcing it.
So the garage problem.
Yeah.
Is that a problem with the external sources or the internal? Are you bringing in busing to create a problem with garages?
No. So the bus garage has been a problem for a long time. Okay. So we've been out of compliance in that area down at, and Dana may know this, but usually cities do not want buses sitting outside first and foremost. So we have 50 buses sitting outside. That facility needs between $1.5 and $2 million improvements just to get the pavement corrected, to get some of the bus garages that are there, which are mostly pole barns, to be upgraded. And that doesn't provide us any more space. We cannot add any more buildings onto that site. It's too small to do that, to maneuver buses around. So to answer your question on insourcing busing, that's a separate situation for us. So we've been looking at whether or not to bring insourcing busing. Can we do that at a lesser cost than what we're paying to outsource it? As you can imagine, when you outsource busing, you're paying a premium because the company needs to make some money.
So Whose garage is that?
It is our garage.
So it's the district's garage, the
Correct.
buses are,
They belong to Positive Connections.
Okay.
Yep, they do. So insourcing that, the transportation, which wouldn't happen until the fall of 2021, so 2 years from now, it takes us time to get that ready. Over a 10-year period, we will save nearly $6 million by insourcing it ourselves. So that was the reason for doing it. It wasn't to say we needed to insource to get a new bus garage. We needed to do something with the bus garage, and we've been needing to for quite a while. So we'll sell that property. And in fact, the county is interested in that property for a new Health and Human Services Center, I believe, and the DMV, moving that out of the Chaska location, and then Chaska has plans for the DMV for their library. So that, again, that's not part of the referenda. That's just an after effect of what could happen. So, and
Yep.
Is it common that school districts own bus garages, even though the busing
yeah,
is?
that's a great question.
else?
Some do. Some have already insourced their transportation and do own their bus garage. Part of the reason why I believe this happened in early 2000, and the company that was there then left. But when you own your own bus garage and you have the opportunity to put out an RFP for the various bus companies versus being tied to a bus company that owns the garage in your community. Does that make sense? Okay.
You alluded to the fact that it's $12,000 to educate a student.
It's roughly that. Whoops, sorry.
Do you know what the number in Eastern Carver County Schools is currently to educate a student?
Well, that is the number.
That is the number.
So if you take what our total budget is and you divide it by the number of students, the Department of Education does this, it's in our audit report, and it's around 12,000. We're on the lower end of other communities that are similar to ours on the cost.
so if you increase it $550
Mm-hmm.
bucks per student, that's about 5% of 12,000. Am I doing the math correctly?
Yeah,
So
I'm a
you're
calculator.
asking for a 5% increase in the basic cost of education.
So if I can back up here again, remember I said that our revenue hasn't met our expenses, right? So we've already spending that amount that's included in the 12,000 that you've asked me about. This will just make the revenue be even with what we've already expended.
So
Yeah,
the amount you spend is going to stay the same. You're just bringing up the revenue to
Correct.
match the cost.
that's right. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
There'll be some increased in expenses. We'll have, if we, question 2, which I didn't mention, is contingent on question 1 passing. And the reason is you want to make sure that you have operational costs for opening a new elementary school. You have new custodians, you have secretaries, administrative assistants, you have a new principal, you're going to have paraprofessionals, you're going to have utility costs to open that school. So some of that money is earmarked for that, part of that growth factor.
So just so I have to be clear, the $550 per student is an increase in funding to balance the budget.
Correct.
It's not an increase in the quality of what you're going to spend per person. So
If
your basic spend.
I wouldn't say we aren't going to be improving the quality, because we always are trying to improve the quality of everything we do.
On the other
But
hand, you should be able to pay for what you have. So, but
Mm-hmm.
you're not changing what you're spending per student. You're bringing up the revenue to
match what?
match what you're paying.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep. And if we don't, then we're making budget reductions. That's the plan for next year.
That's the deduction, is if you don't do this.
Yep. Then we need to make budget reductions of about 4.5 million. I got to be conscientious of time here. Where are we at?
Quickly, Judy?
No, I'm fine with it. Basically, what you're saying is that
Mm-hmm.
you're running at a deficit.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the increase.
Correct.
You don't have to cut in order to stay
Right.
in the black.
That's right. We're running at a deficit this current year and will next year as well.
Tom?
Regarding insourcing for busing, is that common for larger schools?
It depends on, there are several. Eden Prairie does it right next door to us. They're very comparable in size. They run their own. It's It can be either way. I mean, same with school nutrition. Some school districts run their own school nutrition program, which we do, and some outsource it as well. So
Any others besides Eden Prairie?
maybe I could call on one of our board members in the back.
South Washington County Schools, Edina Public Schools, Bloomington.
Yeah, some bigger schools.
All right, for the record, which board member was it? Just
That is Ron Meyer.
right. I don't know if they.
Yep.
You want to repeat his answer? I don't know if it was picked up.
Oh, so he said it was Edina, Bloomington, South Washington County, Eden Prairie, Bloomington. I think I said repeating myself. Yep.
I got one more question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This referendum that you're after this year,
Uh-huh.
how long into the future does this cover us? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? What's the expected
Sure.
length of time?
Well, we can only predict on the bond side of it, depending on how fast all of you cities grow. So we have information from you for 5 years. We don't have out 10 years as to necessarily where you're going. I mean, the information that's in our enrollment numbers that we've given you, the first 5 years are pretty solid based on what you've told us from all the cities. So past that, could there be another elementary school in 5 years? It depends on whether the growth really comes that all of you project and how fast things get developed here. Our middle schools and our high schools right now have the capacities. So as these children continue to grow, we believe we have the capacity, but it all depends on how quickly we have more people coming in and more housing developed.
Okay. I know you're short on time, so I'll be very brief here.
Okay.
In the past, what's been the typical length of the referendums?
On an operating referenda, all of ours have been 10 years. Bond referendas are 20 years. That's pretty standard across the state. And the third question can be anything under 10 years, up to 10 years, both question 1 and question 2. That question 3, we had it for 6 years, and now we're asking it for 10 years.
So 10 years, is that typical in other school districts?
Oh, sure.
Is that unusual?
Yeah, I think most of them are 10 years.
Okay.
And part of the reason is because they don't want to continue to come back to the voters to renew something that they've already approved in the past.
Right. Historically, has inflation been included in your referendum?
The last one was when Chanhassen High School was built, so that was like 2006. Yeah, but the last one in 2015 did not have an inflation factor.
So inflation's in all three of the questions this time?
Nope, just question 1.
Just question 1?
Right.
The others do not have inflation?
Nope. Question 2 is a dollar amount, and question 3 is based on net tax capacity. So that can fluctuate up or fluctuate down depending on the valuations of the homes.
Got it.
Makes
Thank
sense?
you. Yep,
Yeah,
thank you. The council, they need to get to the school board, so is there any final quick question? But we have to be brief here. We got to respect, they got to get back.
You certainly can contact me. You can go to the website. There's a lot of information, or you can send the superintendent a question as too, okay? Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to continue now with the open forum. I have a number of slips. The first one, Gwen Michael, please state your name and your address for the record, please.
Hi, my name's Gwen Michael, and my address is 7100 Gunflint Trail in Chanhassen. I'm a parent in District 112, and I wanted to talk to you guys tonight about my concerns with the transparency of the referendum that was just presented to you. So I have some prepared marks, but I might go off a little bit because I caught some notes there. First of all, I don't have a fluffy video to show you. I just have the parent perspective of the information that we're receiving and what we're given so we can make an educated vote to vote. It came to our attention that transparency was an issue, so several of us rolled up our sleeves and began to extensively research the referendum that is up for vote November 5th. Our research used the district's own documents, so I just want to start out with saying that everything I'm going to say here, there is a document to support what we found. And I'm going to first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to back up to the 2015 referendum. And at that time, we did have 4,083 elementary students in our district. Our district reports showed at that time we had a program capacity of 4,205. The referendum we had in front of us at that time asked for a new elementary school specifically for K through 5, and the needs shared with us included the growth projection of 400 new K through 5 students, and that was supposed to happen within 4 years. Voters approved that building. We ended up with Carver Elementary. We also expanded Victoria and Clover Ridge. The results, we added program capacity for our K through 5 of 1,100 students. From 2014 to 2019, we ended up growing by a mere 156 students.
What was the projection?
The actual results, the projection, was 400 students in 4 years. And between 2014 and 2019, we grew 156 students.
All right, thank you.
As we approached the 2019 school year, our enrollment was projected at 4,239 students, and our program capacity is now 5,203. That's 966 students we have capacity for in the K through 5 program. And that's not our building capacity, that is actual program capacity from the district's reports. When we questioned today about when we questioned the district about our need to build in 2015, we were told that we were playing catch up. However, in 2016 tells us a different story. District 112 reset the boundaries. They shifted over 1,000 students, and specifically 800 students were shifted from 2 elementary schools in Chaska. We literally emptied 24 classrooms in a building suited for our youngest learners. In fact, the building has a program capacity of 560 students that the district now today claims they've erased from our program capacity numbers. So if we erase it, okay, we still have space for 406 new students right now. When I'm done, I'm going to leave you with a few of the district documents that back up this information. And in it, you'll see some capacity and projection enrollments. I'm going to call out Victoria Elementary, since it's close to you. And in there, and Dee Dee talked about a little bit, our district the school district updates us regularly on the progress that they're making, and we've been updated on the expansion program at Victoria Elementary. They're very proud of the 6 classrooms that they added for 25 students. I know Dee Dee mentioned 5, but it was 6, and that brought us up to 150 additional students here at Victoria Elementary. However, if you look at the reports I'm going to pass to you, what they're claiming today is that we only added space for 55 new students. So we wanted to know why. So what we found is that the reason is in 2017, with little to no student growth, the non-K through 5 programs, such as pre-K, were moved into schools. And now those programs are used by the district to shrink our elementary student capacity. So when you look at the capacity report, they've eliminated that because of the pre-K that they've put in there. You've heard Dee Dee talk about them moving them back and forth. This is not what voters passed a bond for. State statutes require community ed programs have different budgets. What about the spaces? We now have questions regarding if their space should be paid for by our taxpayer bonds, especially when the voters were told that the space would be used specifically for K through 5. In 2018, our new growth projections were completed by Davis Demographics. We received messages that appear to be ever-changing. The first one, 1,400 students in 10 years. It progressed to 1,000 students in 5 years, and now we're at 1,400 students in 5 years. Now we have reason to question these figures. We know the past 10 years we grew at a rate of 15.5%. Our growth projection now shows elementary will grow at 13% in the next 10 years. So we looked at the district's historical data, current enrollment, and upcoming projections. The enrollment tells us a concerning story. Our growth has been moderate compared to the projections mentioned above. For example, to date, in the past 2 years, just since I've done this study, we have enrolled 307 less students than what they projected. So if we're going to catch up to these growth projections, we need to add 600 new students by September of 2020. In questioning this information, a new report emerged from Wald Architect. The growth projections appear to be inflated, student capacity underrepresented, and their report demonstrates that 542 elementary students are not represented when using similar data from district reports used and applied to to the middle and the high school students. This report removes the kindergarten center completely and also demonstrates when actual data is applied, we can sustain our 13% growth rather than choose to build a school just because we have that land. A significant referendum transparency I also want to call out is about this referendum is it's missing $90 million. In June of 2019, we had an article in our local paper that was published that says the referendum's cost was $121 million. Just last week, the same paper printed that our referendum cost $211.7 million. That's $90 million that was missing for a period of 4 months, and missing meaning it wasn't corrected. However, the school district, once a video started circulating, within 48 hours addressed that video. A letter to the editor in the paper was addressed within a week. But our voters who were out voting as of September 20th were okay being misled at the price of the referendum. I don't think that's acceptable, and it's not providing information that's letting voters be informed about their decisions before they get to their ballot. Other referendum transparency issues include, in question 1, the only place the voters will learn about the referendum that's open to adjusting for inflation is by either watching your minutes or looking at a sample ballot or the ballot itself. Not in any literature that's been shared. Question 3, we've heard it's no cost. Tonight's the first time I've heard it's a no tax increase. In the article that was recently published, the editor estimates it has a cost of $1,693.20 over its 10-year duration on a home valued at $350,000. That's not free. The current levy is set to expire 6 years after we were asked for $2.45 million per year. Now what's happened is the terms have changed. It's projected now that it'll bring in $4.4 million for 10 years. What's the district going to do with an additional $30 million? We don't know.
Gwen, you're a bit over. Let me ask you to wrap up, please.
Yep. I'm just going to wrap up with the last statement. Is I know DD called out that it's a cost of $36 per month. The article, which dove into the specifics of what this cost is, did call out that that cost for the homeowner of $350,000 is actually $50.58. So our first, I want to thank you because it's forums like this that help flush out information. We keep learning more. But obviously, we have concerns about the transparency with this and would obviously like our district to take it back to the drawing board and clean it up and bring it back for a vote later on. And I will leave you just copies of the documents.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we get these down to Dana? Dana, can we make sure that these are added to the packet? Thank you. Next up, Cindy Pugh, the former state representative. For the record, please, Cindy.
Cindy Pugh, Chanhassen, 260 Mountain View Court. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, and good evening. I'm Cindy Pugh, Carver County resident for over 30 years. I served 3 terms in the Minnesota House of Representatives and was a voice for many in this area. I'm here tonight speaking for many of those individuals, which include former constituents who reside in Eastern Carver County School District 112. I would like to shed some light on the upcoming referendum and why I'm passionate about it being defeated. I want to help the average citizen of Eastern Carver County who's busy working and raising their family understand why. The numbers you just heard expose a school district which is not being transparent. They're creating a crisis in the schools that simply doesn't exist. When the district artificially inflates the number of students enrolled, while at the same time artificially lowering the number of seats available for students, they create a situation which makes it look like a new school is needed. It's outrageous that this district is conning. I wish I could come up with another word, but I feel that that's what this is. It's citizens into passing an unnecessary referendum and for $211 million, no less. But there's more. It's been discovered that the school district has placed pre-K programs into its elementary schools, using up classrooms which could be used for elementary students. These programs are not mandated by the state of Minnesota. In other words, this district is choosing to house these programs in its schools. schools. Also identified was that these preschool programs are for profit, meaning that the community ed is running a money-making operation out of its 3 elementary school buildings, competing with private sector preschool programs, many of which are housed in homes and other locally owned buildings, not to mention those operated by churches in the area. Just to be clear, I am not speaking on behalf of those who are against preschools. We are against non-mandatory, for-profit preschool programming utilizing space that should be designated for elementary education. And we're against a school board that has tried to fool the public into believing that they're running out of capacity without having been open and honest about this important matter. We're against a district that is creating a crowding crisis and then asking taxpayers to build them a new school. Let's look at Victoria Elementary, for example. The last referendum allotted $3.9 million to add 6 classrooms to this school with room for 150 students. And Gwen just mentioned this, referenced this specifically. This should have given Victoria Elementary years of capacity, even with all the new housing in this town. Why are you hearing there will soon be crowding? Could it be because of what the district isn't telling you, that the pre-K program is taking up 3 of those classrooms and 75 potential seats? The fact is there's plenty of room for growth if the pre-K is moved to another building. Other school districts in the area, like Eden Prairie and Minnetonka, run their pre-K programs out of community centers, not schools designated for K through 12 programming. Why doesn't District 112 follow suit? How can taxpayers trust a district that shows very little transparency, one that asks for a new school rather than removing for-profit pre-K from existing facilities? The job of the superintendent and the district's elected school board is to do what's best for K through 12 education, period, not for preschools. So why are they doing this? The district believes that getting pre-K children into the elementary schools will encourage parents to keep them there for future years, hoping that parents will stop open enrolling their kids out of the district. And why is this a worry? The answer is likely because there have been a lot of parents from District 112 open enrolling their kids into the Minnetonka schools. Last year alone, 852 students open enrolled into Minnetonka. Stop and think about that and ask yourselves why. I would think that the superintendent and school board would want to know the answer. You'd think they would want to know why parents are choosing to leave. What do Minnetonka schools offer that Eastern Carver County schools do not? Is it possible that the Minnetonka superintendent and its school board listens to their parents? Is it possible that they don't make new rules to keep parents from speaking at school board meetings? Is it possible that they understand that an equity program such as the one this district is intent on implementing will harm children and not help them? Is it possible that they're offering their students a more traditional education? Vladimir Lenin stated, "Give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seeds I have sown will never be uprooted." You see, it's the seeds that matter, not the buildings, not the bus garages, not the technology. It's the seeds. What seeds is District 112 planting in our children? I'm concerned. Is it racial division? Is it white privilege? A disdain for our founding fathers? Socialism? These things come up with equity programs, one which keeps many children from achieving their maximum potential, given the push for equal outcomes. A message must be sent to this district and to this school board to turn this equity ship around, to be honest with us, to give us more transparency, to stop manufacturing capacity problems. This community doesn't want to fund this and wants its American education back. Our kids matter. They are our future. We, the parents, grandparents, and the stakeholders of these children and their education will continue to fight for them. I implore the community to vote no on the referendum, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Vicki Ernst. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Vicki Ernst, 840 Cree Drive, Chanhassen. Also a former city council member for 8 years. This election season, Eastern Carver County Schools will be asking parents and taxpayers to give them more of their hard-earned money for a referendum. I stand here representing many Carver County citizens who have the following concerns and will be voting no on this referendum. The Eastern Carver County School Board breached our trust by being disingenuous about the actual cost of this referendum. As Gwen stated earlier, it's not $121 million, but $211.7 million. Big difference. They have breached our trust by hiring so-called experts like Dr. Muhammad Khalifa, who have been openly anti-Semitic in social media accounts and have written anti-white and anti-Christian papers. Khalifa and his associates also subsequently scrubbed their social media after their agenda was exposed. They have breached our trust by putting together a one-sided equity advisory committee that is comprised of left-wing progressive activist parents, 3 of whom have recently sued the school district, yet still on the Equity Advisory Council. Some others belong to the George Soros funding Indivisible Activist Group. They have breached our trust by pushing equity, not equality, in the classrooms. With equity, your children will be looked through a lens of race in everything they do. Teachers will be hired and fired based on race. History will be revised based on race. Children will be shamed with terms like white privilege, based solely upon their skin color. Our Constitution guarantees all children equality and rejects the socialist agenda of equity. They have breached our trust by giving out the email addresses of parents and students in the district without parental permission. They also sent these surveys to students during the school day without informing students ahead of time. They have breached our trust by asking students very personal questions on the survey without appropriate provisions in place to protect their privacy. They have breached our trust by hiring an equity director, Dr. Keith Stanley Brooks, who pushes the Marxist critical race theory and believes that all white people are privileged and inherently racist. By the way, we have evidence of all of this. They have breached our trust by telling us that their work with Dr. Khalifa is done, yet the district website clearly states that school administrators are enrolled in the inaugural cohort of the University of Minnesota's Culturally Responsive Leadership Academy, which runs through March 2020. They have breached our trust by altering capacity numbers and enrollment numbers on district documents to make it appear that a new elementary school is needed sooner than necessary. They breached our trust by using K-5 classrooms for a non-mandatory for-profit preschool, thereby displacing elementary students from classrooms and creating an artificial need to build another school at taxpayers' expense. With the upcoming referendum, how possibly can we trust Eastern Carver County Schools to use District 112 money responsibly and wisely when they have already proven themselves to be untruthful and deceitful with the stakeholders and taxpayers many times? I encourage all District 112 residents to vote no on all 3 questions on the upcoming Eastern Carver County School referendum on November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Paul Hepperla. Name and address, please.
Yep. Good evening. Paul Hepperla, 1340 Narcissus Curve, Victoria. Before I talk about the referendum, I just want to say you guys are doing a great job, and it's nice to see that you all getting along. So big difference to last year, so I applaud the work that you're doing, so thank you. I'm here to voice my opposition to the referendum. My focus lays primarily with the aspects of equity and equality. In 2014, the Obama administration sent out a Dear Colleague letter which gave guidance, quote-unquote guidance, on how to comply with federal law when it came to school discipline. The administration then threatened the administrators if they didn't comply with the guidance to sue them, and it drew further the idea of equity. There's a whole conversation around disparate impact versus disparate treatment and the court laws that are associated with that, and that's what drove some of this. So the modern day movement on equity is often demonstrated in a cute little cartoon showing small children standing on a box so that everybody can see over the fence to see the baseball game. Despite the cuteness, it's social engineering at its core. I'm afraid we've arrived at our Harrison Bergeron moment. In 1961, Kurt Vonnegut authored the famous short story Harrison Bergeron. It began, quote, "The year was 2081 and everyone was finally equal. They weren't only equal before God and the law, they were equal in every which way. Nobody was smarter than anyone else. Nobody was better looking than anybody else. Nobody was stronger or quicker than anybody else. All this equality was due to the 211th, 212th, and 213 amendments to the Constitution and to the unceasing vigilance of agents of the United States Handicapper General." It's a great story. Go read it. It's the fictitious story of George and Hazel Bergeron and their son Harrison. It was all about the efforts of creating those boxes, in my opinion. Harrison was 7 feet tall, intelligent, beautiful, strong. In order to make sure others felt equal, he was forced to carry tons of weighted sacks, mask his face, wear headphones that were triggered with sounds from the government in order to stunt his intelligence. He rebelled, and the story ends. District 112 is starting to act like the handicapper general. Paula Dressel, speaking for the Race Matters Institute, said, quote, "The route to achieving equity will not be accomplished through treating everyone equally. It will be achieved by treating everyone justly according to their circumstances." Beyond the quote sounding eerily familiar to Karl Marx's famous adage, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs, what Ms. Dressel fails to address is how far do we take those circumstances? We hear about white privilege, Christian privilege, the role of race in the achievement gap. We hear about some aspects of race. Why don't we do a deep dive? Let's look at two-parent privilege, actively involved parent privilege, or even Asian privilege. After all, Asian Americans do better than white Americans in school, on IQ tests, on credit scores, and other measures. An article in the Los Angeles Times in 2014 examined the achievement gap between whites and Asian students. It came down to greater work ethic and cultural attitudes, not innate cognitive ability. We can go on and on about the fallacies around equity. It has not worked. There's no demonstrable proof in any study that shows the equity approach does anything to achieve and reduce the achievement gap. The district's heading down the same path as St. Paul schools. Aaron Benner, which you've seen recently in the news, spoke out against equity policies of the district and was fired for doing so. He recently settled a lawsuit, and he said, and I quote, "The district through that curriculum and performance model were essentially told racial equity means equal results. And in my opinion, racial equity is not equal results, but it's about fairness and everyone having the same fair chance to succeed." End quote. Here we are in 2019, going backwards. This district is making sure we judge students not by the content of their character, but by the color of their skin or their cultural background or all the things that make them different. I hear from many teachers and staff that they are very unhappy with the direction of this, but they will not speak up because they fear for their jobs. As a resident taxpayer, until this administration and school board regains the trust and confidence of this community, they're not deserving of being trusted with another $211 million in support of the referendum. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Jen Mulvihill.
Hello, Council. Hi, Jen. Before I start, I just want to say I'm so glad to be here and not be talking about roads. No roads. So, woohoo, here we are. Well, I want to thank you guys for your time and for your investment in our community. And I want to just thank the school district also for coming and speaking tonight. I know it was a tight schedule. So as many of you guys know, Josh and I, my husband Josh and I, love this city. We care deeply about it. We love our neighbors. We love our friends here. And we want to see what the best thing is for the city and the people that live here. So in recent months, we have been really disappointed by District 112, the actions and the decisions that have been made by both the school board and the superintendent. So they allowed a very sexually explicit survey to be sent home to children as young as 9 years old. Think about a 9-year-old. And this was done without parents' consent. They've been having training for teachers so that they can realize their racism. And the district has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to hire politically charged extreme individuals to implement a new agenda for our kids. And the name of this new agenda is called Equity, and it's been championed by the superintendent and it's been championed by the school board. And while on the surface, equity sounds like it would be a really good idea, it is not. And fundamentally, we disagree with the equity agenda, and it's been pushed forward within District 112. The equity agenda is not right for our children. So this leads directly to the upcoming referendum, and sadly, in our household, we're going to be voting no. And it's not because we don't love our schools and our teachers and our administrators and the kids who are our kids' best buddies, but because the money that would be spent from the referendum isn't needed, and it would directly fund the equity agenda further within District 112. And so we can see the numbers. We can see how much is currently being spent per student, and we can see how building spaces are being used for something other than hands-on instructional time for our K-12 students. And we've also heard the threats from the district that the district has made about cutting programs. I heard a threat that they would cut 5th grade band, and I'm a band teacher. I know firsthand how much it costs, the costs involved with teaching 5th grade band. And let me tell you that passing a $200 million referendum should not be the answer to keeping 5th grade band. It's silly. So, yeah, it's laughable. It's laughable. And something I really want to point out is that public school is public. District 12 is not a private organization. It is a government-led public organization that is paid for and run by the people. It is not a private school. It is not a private organization, and they cannot just choose to push their agenda forward as they would like. This is a public organization. So there are voices of individuals who have voiced their unhappiness with this equity agenda, and the district does not seem to want to listen to us or take us seriously. In fact, when issues have been raised, written communication from the district has been called rumors. That's what they called our concerns as the public. They called our concerns rumors, not legitimate concerns. And it's concerning. So, yeah. So this is our money. It's your money. You all are homeowners. It's my money. And the impact is around $600 per year. I know that if someone put an expense in front of my husband and I that said, you're going to need to write a check for this for a $600 expense. If we're buying something that's $600, we're going to research it and we're going to think twice about it. And I would just encourage people in our community to research it and think twice about it. This is an additional $600 to what we already spend. So there are many opinions about what's right for our kids. And whether or not we believe the referendum should pass or fail, I would assert that everyone in our community just wants what's best for our kids, but we have fundamentally different ideas about how we should go about doing that. And so I would just ask the council tonight that you not give endorsement for or against the referendum, but that you would just listen and allow the public to make this public decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's all the slips that I have. Is there anybody else that would like to address the council at this time? Come on up. She had her hand up first. Name and address for the record, please.
Mindy Rector, and I am at 9107 Sunnyvale Drive in Chanhassen. And I am here today to talk to you about my experience in Edina Public Schools. In 2010, after more than a decade of living in the former Soviet Union, my husband and I relocated our family to Edina. And the fact that it was a top school district, a destination school district that was focused on academic excellence is why we chose to live there. But at that time, we didn't realize what direction the district was heading. In 2013, they revised their mission to the All for All plan. All for All's number one priority is to close the racial achievement gap. It committed to look at all district work and initiatives through the lens of racial equity. It defined educational equity as promoting equality of education results in all student subgroups. It defined success as high achievement without predictable links to race or income. Its premise is that institutional racism and white privilege are the primary cause of the achievement gap, not things like family breakdown or other socioeconomic factors that are totally outside of the school's purview and ability to influence. 6 years of investment has passed since then, and Edina has not closed the racial achievement gap. In many cases, it has widened, and test scores have fallen across all demographics. I did bring for you some charts that I'll give you that show the decline in math and reading scores that have taken place, and I did mark the start of the equity initiative on the charts. So why is this? As residents of Edina for 7 years, we observed several negative results that played a role in us moving out of the district. I can't discuss all that we saw in my small time here, so I'll only highlight 3, which include license for partisan administrators and staff to reshape curriculum and instruction to promote their preferred ideology at the expense of legitimate academic instruction. This resulted in the dilution of academic rigor and intolerance and oppression of students who didn't toe the line. For over 2 years, a large group of concerned parents, which I was a part of, have been fighting for curriculum change that will actually prepare students for college placement testing. 2 years later, they're still fighting a school board, administration, and staff that are steeped in fundamentally transforming the schools with this equity ideology. Academic excellence allows students to learn how to think, not what to think. Second, we saw an environment of divisiveness based on skin color, politics, and ideology. This was evidenced in different behavior expectations and disciplinary consequences based on student skin color. This led in at least one case to a lawsuit filed against the district by the Youth Conservative Club. They won on every single count. There's no question that racial relationships in the schools have been damaged from Edina's equity focus. Families, the third thing I'll talk about today is families fleeing the district and going to private school or open enrolling in other districts. Between 2018 and 2019 school years, Edina had a net loss of 93 students, which is significant for Edina. That was a 28% increase in students open enrolling out of the district. This led to an unprecedented and unexpected shortfall in the budget. Edina responded by commissioning an outside company to conduct an outbound family survey to determine why this was happening. Parents stated key reasons, including the district failing to meet their students' learning needs and the district's liberal agenda. The consulting firm who conducted this survey said they had never seen that as a reason before. In the words of a current Edina school board member who is a person of color, a narrow understanding of educational equity took hold in the last decade and inspired school leaders to undercut educational approaches representing decades of teacher refinements and student successes in favor of proposals saturated with the great hope of fixing lingering social injustices in the broader American culture. That was unfortunate. It's time to restore the focus of education to the student, not the society. My deepest hope is that each teacher facing a choice between either doing what's right for their society or what's right for their student chooses the child. District 112 has hired a director of equity and inclusion that supports critical race theory, which is a divisive ideology that sees the world as a struggle and fight between groups of oppressed and oppressors. District 112 has adopted this critical race theory-based equity program without providing us any evidence of its success in healing tension and improving student outcomes in other districts. We have a loss in the trust of District 112, and my family will be voting no on the referendum.
Thank you. Thanks. I saw one more hand. Vince, name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, Vince Bodette in Victoria, 1185 79th Street. Just a statement here about the nature of the communications coming from our group, which we formally call district or parents for D112. We also call ourselves or think of ourselves as a no group, and with some very good reasons. So first that, and then just a brief comment. Many persons, parents in this school district 112 have received an email from our campaign. There's been a controversy about how this group, our group, the D112 parents, received those emails. How did we get those email addresses? We did it legally. We were told by parents that had received emails from the Vote Yes campaign, meaning that the Vote Yes team had gotten all the email district addresses from the district. If the district gives emails to the Vote Yes campaign and they are spending a fortune to sell this $200 million white elephant, or whatever you want to call it, if the district is going to spend all that money, then we ought to be able to use a FOIA request and counter with our own email addresses for a Vote No campaign. So that is exactly what we did. We sent in a FOIA to Mr. Christopher asking for equal access to all these addresses. He sent the request to his associate, the paperwork all fully filled out. Yes, we paid the money to get those email addresses, and we've received them, and yes, we are using them. Anybody receiving these emails from us can easily opt out. There's something at the bottom of each email. Don't send me any more emails. And that's the end of that. Excuse me. So the Vote No campaign is has sent the unsolicited emails the one time so far. There may be more, but opt out if you don't like what you're seeing. We really think that people ought to who have an issue with Mr. Christopher and the way we're doing things, they ought to just have him change his policies. Don't include names on email lists of people who don't want to be communicated with. Also, just a comment here, so much as the big lie is racism. We've heard so much about racism. We are getting calls, protests about being racist. We are not racist. We are people who oppose this school board. This school board, as you heard all night now, or so far this evening, they've not been honest with us. We don't want to just send them another $212 million when they haven't been honest with us about what they're taking, what they want, and what they're using it for, and why they have a need for it in the first place. So if anybody wants to call us racist, well, I guess they're just being dishonest or ignorant. I'd argue that with any pinhead professor on the horizon. This is not about racism. This is about the honesty of our school board. Thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else? Please. Name and address for the record.
Julie Poplinski, 2470 Marshview Court. I did not come prepared to speak tonight, so apologize for that, and I'm so not comfortable speaking in public. So, well, we'll just let it fly.
You'll do fine.
Okay. There's just a few things I'd like to say as a concerned parent of kids in the district. And I want it to be known that I love my kids' teachers, adore them, to the point that I think of them as friends. And I went to one of my friends because the opposition has said, if you're concerned, go to the teachers and talk to the teachers, because that sounds completely logical, right? So I went to a teacher and I said, hey, and I'm not going to divulge who it is, what are your thoughts on this equity thing? And that's exactly how I pointed it to her. And her response was, well, I'm going to stay neutral because I've been told I can't discuss it. Really? Now why? Why would that be? So now I'm super curious. And I go to the school district building to watch the equity training videos. So, by and large, they're harmless. However, there's a section of the video that has a glossary of terms. And it shows the term on the screen, and then it's read aloud by Keith Brooks. Now, I don't know what you guys, your definition of racism is. Perhaps it's purely white against black. That's never been my definition. I think that racism can come in all different ways, towards all different groups, from all different groups. But I'll tell you, the definition that they have for anti-racism is exactly what I'm going to read to you now. Conscious and deliberate, individual and collective action that challenges the impact and perpetuation of intentional white racial power, position, and privilege. I took exception to that. My kids are white, and I've not raised them to see color. In fact, I've tried to encourage my daughter to be friends with a little Muslim girl in her class. We were told by that dad that she will not be able to be friends with Emily outside of school because she is not a Muslim. So, but we don't. I mean, I still go to lunch with my daughter and sit with this girl. She's a lovely girl. And I told my daughter, just, she's going to be a friend you're going to have at school. And unfortunately, you won't be able to play with her outside of school. It's a sad thing. Now, putting that aside, I sent Clint Christopher an email. And I got up at the City of Chaska Council meeting, and at that point, he had not responded to any of the people who sent emails. And I I couldn't believe it. Instead, he referred to everything as a rumor. So he then responded to me. And when I asked for proof, because I thought certainly when you go to hire Mohammed Khalifa to do your equity consultation, I'm sure they looked at other outfits, right? When you get your house painted, you just don't call one guy and say, okay, you want to charge me 10 grand? Go ahead, do it. No, you get a few people or outfits to come in and offer their solution, correct? So I said, certainly he provided you with statistical data that shows he's got the goods. This is the guy. He's going to come in and save the day. Show us. Show us how he improved test scores in all these other districts that he partnered with. It's hard to find out who he partnered with because he changes the name of the company he works for at each place, which I'm sure is completely normal. And so, okay, so he responds, Mr. Christopher responds with a resume of Clint Christopher, of Mohammed Khalifa, not statistical data. Okay, well, all right, deflect, fine. Then the other concerns I brought up were the Victoria Elementary expansion, which we've already heard how that panned out. He told me it was program capacity, not building capacity. And then I brought up the bus garage. Because, and I told him in my email, it's my understanding that if this referendum passes, they have agreed that they will purchase land from Southwest Transit that already has a bus garage on it. So, and I looked at the sample ballot to just make sure I wasn't losing my mind, and it says funds to build a new garage. And his response to me, it says at the June meeting, they did determine that if the referendum passes, they will do that property purchase, but that building needs work. Okay, well, work is a significantly different price tag than a new building. So which is it? Is it work or is it a new building? So then I think, well, you know what? I'm just going to go to the meeting minutes. So I go to the district meeting minutes, and I see where they talked about it. So then, okay, well, I'm going to bring up the video. So I bring up the video, and now they're going to go talk about the purchase of the property for the bus garage, but it's in a closed session. Now, is that normal? Maybe it is. Maybe they talk about all that stuff, but no public was allowed to hear what was discussed, and it wasn't videoed. So is that where they had the little conversation about, well, it's got a garage, but we'll just get funds to build a new garage because, we don't know how much money we'll need. I mean, I don't know what was said. I'm making that up. But I just found it unusual that it was behind closed doors. Why all the shadiness? Why all the non-transparency? And if you look back in April after some racial incidents happened, Roar, I think you've heard of Roar, they went to the school board and had an open forum that lasted over 2 hours. They let everyone speak for as long as they wanted to. You can probably go watch the video. Well, I'd like to say the same for the last meeting we went to, but we were all held to 3 minutes. We were told if there was any applause, they would cut it off. And then guess what? Those of us that spoke, we'd like to go watch what we said, but the videotape doesn't work. So if anyone out there, concerned citizens, wanted to hear our side of it, they can't because there's no video. So, as a parent who has always and will hopefully in the future vote yes for every education referendum, I cannot in sound mind vote yes on this one. I will be a hard no. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to address the council? We heard that. With that, we're going to go ahead and close down now the open forum. I'd like to thank everybody for coming up here, and Julia, you did just fine speaking. Moving back to the council meeting, we finished the open forum. Can I get a motion to adopt the final agenda? Council, please.
I make a motion to adopt final agenda.
Second, please.
Second.
Discussion, any changes? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The agenda is adopted. Next, the consent agenda. Can I have a motion, please, council, to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as written.
Thank you. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Discussion. At this point, does anybody want to pull anything off the consent agenda? Public, council, staff?
None from staff.
No. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of adopting the consent agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing none. The consent agenda passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item. Okay, we're at the regular agenda. First item up is item 7.1. Cindy, this is yours. A temporary liquor license for Victoria Lions Club.
Yep. So the Lions Club have made application for their annual pork chop dinner on November 8th, and there has been, since their last pork chop dinner, there's been an increase in the statutory limit on municipal liability to 1.5, and our application asks for a $2 million. So that's what we had posed to them, or that's one on our application, and they are asking for it to be reduced to $1 million due to the increase in their insurance premium, increasing from $1,000 to $4,250. As staff recommended, we would consider to the $1.5 million from what we understand the liability to be.
Okay.
Is that it, Cindy? Yes. Okay, Judy?
Okay, so I went to the statutes and I looked, and the 1.5 is the max, it's not the minimum, and the minimum is $310,000, which the Lions have $1 million policy. By changing it to $2 million, it's going to quadruple their premium. And I just don't think that that is what we need to do as a council. I'd like to know, when they sign that contract and they buy that license or buy that insurance, is the city responsible in any way? Is there a reason that we recommended $2 million?
Yeah, so Mayor and Council, just to clarify, so the 1.5 million change from 1 million,
yes,
that's a change in the cap, the highest
right.
limit on city tort liability. So in other words, that's with narrow exceptions, forget about the exceptions, basically that's the limit that cities in Minnesota could be sued for and end up owing in damages. It is common, there is a statutory minimum on what cities must require. Cities that issue liquor licenses, there is a minimum that cities must require in the way of insurance. Many cities go beyond that limit. That limit is not 1.5 million, it's quite a bit lower than that.
That's
Many
the 310?
Yeah, the 310.
It's 310, that's right. Many cities require insurance from bars, from places that might have dram shop liability for serving alcohol, that exceeds that minimum. And many cities pick their own municipal liability cap as the amount of insurance they require. And the theory, I guess, behind that, I'm not an insurance coverage expert, but the theory, as I understand it, behind that is that there is some theoretical risk that a city that has issued a license to a bar, that bar has had an accident occur related to the serving of alcohol, that the city's issuance of the license could be something that the city could be sued over because the city was allegedly negligent in issuing the license. And so the theory would be, we want you, bar, to have insurance that matches our city highest cap on liability. So that's the rationale that I think cities use in picking $1.5 million as a cap. And then internally, as I understand it from discussions staff has had about this issue, and I think I've been part of that along the way over the last year, is that the understanding that we have is that insurance is typically sold in $1 million increments. So requiring $1.5 million is tantamount to requiring $2 million. If you're going to require $1.5 million, a party is going to have to provide $2 million because that's the way insurance is sold. So I think that's the backstory on how the city has been at policy level thinking about requiring $2 million. It could be argued, and there are some cities that take the view that there is no real risk of city liability. If a bar overserves someone or something happens at the bar or at the licensed premises, in this case, we're not talking about a bar, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right, we're talking about licensed premises. If something happens related to alcohol, there are some cities that would say we have no potential city liability here. The issue is, would the persons involved in the accident or the damage or the injury, would they have someone to go to and make an insurance claim? And if so, how much do we think is the appropriate amount to require from that licensee? So that was a lot of, I'm not sure I was answering your question,
Well,
but I mean, that's kind of the backstory on.
I went to several websites. I went all around, and the only one that required that in our vicinity was Chanhassen. The rest of them just required state statute, and they just had it, just said state statute minimum. I would think that that would be adequate for people wanting to do this type of thing, and when they speak with their insurance carrier, that they would be the ones to recommend that they go higher. I don't know that we need to be the ones to decide that. And I would like council to think about that.
I have a couple questions.
Go ahead.
Did I hear that the state statute maximum just changed to the $1.5 million, and it was $1 million?
Yes.
That's why this has never come up before.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, it didn't literally just change, but within the last year or two, that cap.
So theoretically, it should have come up before, because
My understanding is it came up last fall.
it didn't come up to the council.
No, this is the first time the council's seen it.
It's never come up to this room since
Well,
I've been here.
they changed the paperwork last October.
But the state, the state maximum changed a year ago.
The cap on municipal tort liability, I don't want to be at all unclear about this. The statute had a ratcheting up cap on municipal tort liability. That statute was enacted 10, 15 years ago, but it had built into it a periodic increase in municipal tort liability that was tied to a particular year. I simply don't recall which year the cap moved from 1 to 1.5.
But it did, and nobody's brought this up as a problem.
Yeah, right.
So that's one issue. The second issue is, this is different than a bar.
Yeah.
We own the property. The city owns Lions Park. So it's like, if we let somebody had a party at our house, kind of thing.
Right.
So there, to me, we have to really be careful. But, the insurance thing looks so ridiculous. I don't know what the answer is, but I think we have to be careful because this property is the city's. This is the city premise that this is on. So you can cut it different ways, but it doesn't change the fact that the city is associated with it.
And they are signing an agreement that the city is not liable. It's on the contract that the city is not liable, that they're taking legal responsibility.
Okay.
Right, but if their insurance doesn't cover it, then in theory, we could be pulled into it and the taxpayers would have to make up the difference.
If somebody died in a lawsuit and sued, anything can happen.
Well, we have insurance, don't we? We have insurance.
The city does, but the question is should the taxpayers be funding this, right? Up till this point, the Lions Club has carried, and Cindy, jump in if I've got this wrong, or Ann, carried $1 million, and you can see here in the note that to go to $2 million, the cost increases significantly, which I find rather odd that it would go up that much to just double the same coverage. In fact, well, if it's $1,000 for $1 million, get a second company to give you a second 1,000, or get you a second $1 million. At the end of the day, I just don't think that we should put the city or the taxpayers at risk here. If they want to have events and they've done a great job, there's never been a problem. I'd like to just see us go along with the statutory maximum, because the city can't be held, if I understood you correctly, Bob, can't be held liable for more than 1.5 million if we're even held liable to begin with. So if we put it at 1.5, basically we're covered if we ever have an incident. Now, here's the other side of the coin. If these numbers are right, I don't want to see the Lions Club have to cover that kind of premium increase. Realistically, I mean, there's no absolutes, but realistically, what's the chances the city would actually be held accountable if the council were to keep it at $1 million as it is today? What's the chances that we would be held accountable for that difference of $500,000?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, the honest answer is I can't answer that other than to say the likelihood of the city, the municipality, having its own independent liability, independent from the server of alcohol, is small. The problem is, and you hear this from me all the time, the problem is that although the risk, the likelihood of that happening is relatively small, the amount of damage that could be done in that very unlikely event could be large, right? I mean, we would be talking about presumably a car accident or an injury or a death that could result in very large damages. And if the city was somehow found liable in some way, again, highly, highly unlikely. But if it were to happen, the amount of money we're talking about is large. So,
and it would exceed the 1.5 million?
Well, the city's liability under any circumstance is capped at 1.5 million. So if the city was directly liable somehow, the city stepped in for the Lions and served the alcohol and overserved and someone was killed, the city's liability is capped at $1.5 million. So, no.
But that's how it would
Got it.
happen.
Got
The
it.
city would have to be involved in it.
Right, so council?
I have a question. Mr. Vos, can you tell us the contract that the Lions Club signs with us that releases us of liability? Does that cover us?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I think those are useful, and many, many cities would, when a city facility is being used, require that. Are those sort of airtight, which I think is your question? The answer is no, they are not airtight. And you're talking about the city having liability against it released by the Lions when the injured party presumably is somebody else, not a Lion Club member, not somebody that's subject to that agreement, and so they could simply say, yes, the Lions are responsible, but the city is too. Now, I don't know what the facts are, right? I don't know what, we'd have to be making something up where the city is accused of some independent liability, independent from the Lions, but we could sit here and make those facts up. So, yes, that is not airtight.
Right, I'm sorry, more questions from the council?
What kind of insurance do we require from our bar owners? I mean, do we require them to have that same 1.5 or $2 million?
No, that's separate because it's not city-owned property.
Not city-owned property, which, because it's city-owned property, as Mr. Volk Councilmember Vogt said, I think that increases our liability. So if we are requiring people that sell liquor, if we're requiring them to have a 1.5 or 2 million, I don't see how we can have a lesser amount for the loan.
Valid question. Do we know?
Yeah, it's like 50,000 or 100,000 is way low. Most of them have over 1 million or 2 million, but the requirement is less than 1 million.
The requirement is less.
But the city's not tied to those businesses in any way, shape, or form. That's the difference.
So how good is the Lions insurance policy?
Theirs is at 1 million.
Yeah.
Right, but I mean, the insurance has all kinds of variations. There's umbrellas, there's, if you add a security person, it changes things. Is there any flexibility here that we've heard about? Can the Lions change the protocol and have someone there? Does that change anything?
No, I don't think so. No, there's nothing in the contract that says that.
Is this
It's just a straight contract.
Is this a fundraising activity for the
Yes.
Lions? Yeah.
So you're going to take all their money.
Right.
They have-
Right.
I don't think anybody
So-
wants to do
So you
that.
have to have 10 of these just to pay for their insurance.
So like, so why do it?
We need a sponsor for the insurance.
And I'm telling you, I checked Excelsior, I checked Carver, I checked Waconia, did I say Chaska? Shorewood, Naya, Young America, they were all just, they were all just state statute,
All right.
all of them.
I think the risk is acceptable. I think it's so low that I'm not sure we have a real meaningful risk here. I mean, you can never make any guarantees, but is there a consensus on the council? I'm hearing.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve a temporary on-sale liquor license for Victoria Lions Club on November 8th, 2019 for their annual pork chop dinner at the Lions Pavilion with their liquor and liability coverage to be a minimum of $1 million.
Thank you. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Discussion? Any further discussion?
Mayor, I do have one question, sorry. So is it just for this specific event? Because we do have other events that occur in the Lions Pavilion and also at the Recreation Center, not necessarily tied to liquor per se.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, hold on. Deb, do you want to withdraw your motion and make a new motion?
Policy.
Yeah, do you want to make this a policy, or you want to limit it to this single event?
I think I want to limit it to this single event. I think we'll take a look at the other events as they come up. Does that make reasonable sense?
Okay, so we have a valid motion. Is there further discussion?
I have a question on that. So does that mean that then they'll have to come in front of council every single time?
Well, until we set a policy, that's exactly what's going to happen.
So do we have to do a separate meeting to do a policy?
No, we could, if you want to modify the motion, and we can.
We want to keep this motion separate.
Okay.
If we want to do a policy motion, we should do that separately.
I'm fine with that.
This is serious policy. We shouldn't be doing it on a whim. So let's just take care of this business and.
That's
and then
fine.
take a look at policy, and then maybe we can direct staff to take a policy look later.
All right, so let's pick up that topic in just a second. We have a valid motion as proposed in the staff report. Is there any further discussion, council?
No.
No? All in?
Mayor, just a correction, it's proposed as 1.5 million in the staff report.
Oh, I'm sorry, right, with the noted correction. The motion was for 1 million. Any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that motion carries unanimously. Council, do you want to take time to think about this and bring this back for setting policy going forward at a later date?
Yes.
Is that the consensus?
Yes.
We can do that.
All right, there's three, that's a consensus. Dana, if you could bring something back as far as a long-term policy on that? All right, that completes item 7.2. Next item is Ann 7, I'm sorry, that completed item 7.1, I apologize. Next, we're going to pick up item 7.2 on the agenda, Wassermann Lake Park. Ann, take her away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. This evening, we are going to have a little tour of Wassermann Lake Park and provide a quick update on the park status. I don't know.
Hold on one second, Ann.
Yep.
I'm going to steal it from you.
Oh, do we need to reactivate?
Nope, just leave it.
Okay,
Where am I refreshing?
There you go.
thank you. So, as council is aware, we've been, the Watershed District and the city have been working on Wassermann Lake Park for a number of years. Back in May of 2018, the council approved the concept plan that you see today, that we have carried over for the last couple of years. It included some trail, boardwalk, park shelter, restrooms, a couple different lake accesses, a nature play area, access and parking lot, and also restoration. Back in August of this year, the council and district approved and authorized the hiring of AFLA, the Ani Fernandez Landscape Architects, to start working on a deeper dive into Wassermann Lake Park and carrying forward the concept plan that the council and the district had approved. Many of the same elements are in the updated concept plan as that you see today. It includes picnic shelter, restrooms, trails, boardwalk, lake access, parking lot, trail connections to the neighborhood, play areas. So many of those same elements are carried forward. We're just getting a little bit more deeper in detail onto the concept plans. So with access and parking, we're currently working with Carver County on the turn-in or access from County Road 43. There's some spacing issues, so we are going to be working with them through those issues. We did have a neighborhood meeting last Monday evening, and several people from the neighborhood, specifically that back up to the park off of County Road 43 and Lakeview Drive, attended the meeting and provided some really good comments for us and concerns related to especially the parking lot, because they're going to have an opportunity to see that parking lot once the park is done. They requested screening, yet while preserving the views of the lake. So we are going to continue to work on that with the architects to try to determine how to do that. The parking lot currently has 33 stalls, which the last rendition, I think, had 30 parking stalls permanent with the addition of another 20 paved or grass paved parking stalls for overflow parking. So we're still right in that same neighborhood. One of the things that is important in working with the groups or the neighbors that live right next to the park, the landscape architects took kind of a view from the neighbors. Here's County Road 43, the park property as it sits today, to kind of take a look at what those neighbors would see. Let me get back out of here. So they've done a nice little sketch up as to what the neighbors would see on their walk out the first floor, second floor. So we've got a wetland before the parking lot, and we're looking at screening this area so the neighbors would at least see some nice trees. Here would be sort of the central part of the park, and then back over in here would be the shelter and then the lake on this side. So it kind of gives you an idea of what that cross section looks like moving forward. The shelter and restroom, we're looking at a capacity of about 100 people, which has always been around that area since the concept plan was approved. Looking at year-round use of the restroom facility and the shelter itself. Water access and island access. The initial plan that was approved by council did have a kayak or a boat access near the shelter area. We also were looking at providing a water access up on the island, which would include a fishing pier and a nice overlook. Once the architects started doing a really deep dive into the topography, what the water level and condition is at the shelter area, it was determined that the cost to put in a boardwalk and another pier at that location would be really challenging and also very cost prohibitive. So we're looking at the island access being the true only access for this park right at this point in time. We're also looking at the boardwalk design. The conditions out in this area will change based on water level. The boardwalk sits pretty well into the wetland area. So with the fluctuation of water, like this year it's very high. So we're looking at making sure that the boardwalk is capable of staying durable for a longer period of time with better materials and better construction. And one of the things that the team has been working on is the boardwalk construction schedule. Ideally, the boardwalk should be installed during the winter months. It's a lot easier to get equipment there. Pilings would be used to be drilled into the ground. So a winter construction schedule is what we're going to be looking at moving forward, which ideally at the 90% plan set, which will be done in December, we would also be coming before the council then and asking for 90% plan approval as well as the boardwalk bidding to be done during the winter prior to the park construction. A little bit about the boardwalk. From the plans, you can see there's a edge of the park here, and then it moves out onto the island area with a roughly, I think it's still about a 200-foot section of pier to get out at least into the deeper water. When the consulting team looked at the wetland or the lake around the shelter area, there's a lot of cattails, and the water's only about 2 feet deep, and that was a significant decision point to reduce or eliminate that water access because of the distance it needed to go out into the lake. So just to give you a perspective too, I know within your packet this evening is a email from the Traxler residents that live here. So this is their property, and the line is not showing here, but it's basically here. So we're looking at, it's roughly about 600 feet from the Traxler home to about the center of the island where the park property is located, just to give you some perspective on that. As part of the hiring of AFLA, they really take a look at the existing condition, concept plan, and then begin to put those design elements into the final design, and also provide an estimate budget for the project. Back in May of 18, the initial estimate that the watershed district and the city put together was about 2.1 million, which included a contingency. 18 months later, we're looking at about a $2.5 million budget still with a contingency, which is about 300,000. And based on where construction has been the last year, that 15 to 20% increase in costs, we're seeing that pretty well across the board in construction projects. So one note that I wanted to give you as maybe a discussion point or comparative, the boardwalk alone, which is roughly about 400 feet from the main park out to the island is roughly about $385,000. So this evening, I just wanted to get some council feedback. I know that the district, Anna's here if you've got specific questions related to district, but we're going to be looking at value engineering, which will help, but it won't cover all of that $400,000. With the $300,000 contingency, until we get into the ground and start digging, we're not going to know exactly what we have on site. So, we'd love to keep that contingency in place and not count on that to cover some of the budget increase. As we continue developing the project, we will look at areas of value engineering, but I just wanted to get the council's a little bit of perspective on the budget and specifically the island access and other park elements. So one thing I would like to do is show you a nice little video before we move into discussion. This was put together by the team. This is the entrance coming into the park. As we make our way into the lake area, the design really is a nature-based or natural resource-based design, trying to keep, and I'm going to stop here just for a second. Whoops, I guess I did not stop. We're trying to utilize some of the products. We're going to have some tree removal on site. So one of the concepts that the team put together was to try to utilize the wood with these walls that would define kind of that park area. So just one of the kind of the neat areas. There'd be several little gathering spots off the main plaza area. Here we're moving into the shelter and restroom facility. In a capacity of about 100 people. One of the things that they've looked at too is sometimes when you get to a park, if there's a lot of people using it, you feel like you can't go into the park shelter area. So they've kind of made this as a divider, so people would at least feel welcome if one side is being busy. So you can see how that comes through. One of the things, there's a couple different natural play areas. One of the concerns that I had was, it being too far out away from the shelter. So they are proposing to bring in a gross motor skills play area that would include stumps and trees and culverts for kids to play, and then put like the sticks and stones natural play area out a little bit further in the park design. Again, the trails would kind of go around the perimeter of the facility and then also connect to the neighborhood. And so we're making our way again through the pavilion. There was a fire pit projected to be way out on the island, or way out further into the park, and I suggested, based on fire prevention and access, that we bring it a little bit closer to the shelter, so they've done that as well. So with that, that's the end of the video, and I'm happy to discuss and answer any questions. And again, Anna's here from the Watershed District as well, and you may have some things you want to add to as well.
Anna, anything to add?
Not yet. I'm going to be on the mic.
Okay. Deb?
Yeah. What's magic about 100 people?
We had to come up with a capacity of some sort. When I think ideally we'd like to be able to rent this facility out to picnics, also to have classes available, outdoor education programs. So it was just a number that we felt comfortable going with.
Does the shelter have any kind of classroom space, or?
It's all open air shelter.
Okay, so it's just, other than the bathrooms, everything is?
And picnic tables, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
And this video has nothing on the boardwalk, and that boardwalk is the only access that provides us the lake, because we can't get there by boat any longer. Correct?
You can get there by boat if you come in off the public access.
Okay.
Across the lake.
Is there a reason the video doesn't have the boardwalk and the fishing pier?
It's a good question, Anna.
Because it's such an exciting part of it for.
Yeah, Councilmember Vogt, I'm sure it will be incorporated into the video. The video is a 3D model that they're developing as they design the park. So every time we make a design direction change, the video evolves a little bit. So I'm sure that that's coming. It just hasn't been sort of built into the model quite yet.
There was some talk of
And that was Anna Brown from the Watershed District.
There was some talk of a small structure by the fishing pier at the highest level on land. Is that?
Yep.
So that would have been a good thing for the video too.
Sure, yeah, and Councilmember Vogt, and Council, the packet that Ann included does have some details on some of those special areas, and it does include a little bit of detail on what that island gathering space looks like.
On the island, there was an email, something about eagles. Are there eagles there?
Yeah, Councilmember Black, I have personally seen eagles on the site. So there are eagles, and we are maintaining, and the sort of restoration plan is that it will be an oak savanna across the whole site. So we will be maintaining some of those larger oak trees. The tree removal will mostly be pulling out ash and box elder, and that'll actually encourage more understory growth. So we should see more animals on site, not less.
Okay, because that was a concern of one of the residents.
And I don't know if I did not see an eagle's nest in that specific area.
Yeah, I don't know that I've seen a nest, but I've seen them out there.
Yes.
According to the resident, they land there, and
Fish.
the assumption is to go fish. Right?
Sure, yeah.
And I think that one of the plan is to definitely maintain a buffer from the property line, and try to keep it as natural as possible from the resident to the north.
Council, further discussions?
I attended the Park and Rec meeting, and the Park and Rec Committee was very favorable to pretty much the entire plan. There were very good comments throughout. I think the island is a significant feature, and certainly we like to keep maintaining that, even though it is fairly costly. It is, I mean, one of the primary goals of this was to have water access, and if that's the only way we can get water access, I think that almost, we simply can't do away with that. Go ahead.
I'd just like to know, how did we not know that we didn't have water access until now? I mean, how did we not know? I mean, you guys removed a lot of carp. You would know that it was only a foot deep or 2 feet deep for a extended length.
Sure, Councilmember Black, we knew that it was a shallow area, but we hadn't mapped sort of how shallow, and I'm not an expert in sort of what's ideal for kayaks or how you would build a dock out there, and I mean, that's really the value that Ane Fernandez has brought. In the concept plan stage, we kind of took an approach of, figure out everything that people might want to do on site and try to incorporate that into a concept plan. Now, as we're getting more into design, you're sort of realizing some real world constraints on how you want to construct the area. And Ane Fernandez has a lot of experience doing sort of waterfront based parks and is really able to work through with us, not only what's buildable, but what's actually going to be used or not used.
What's the total capacity of the park expected to be? You have 100 seats in the shelter, but and 33 parking spaces. But if this was popular on a nice day, how many people could this place hold? And does it make sense that we have only 33 parking spaces? Because otherwise you're going to have cars parked on that narrow road coming in.
And didn't you say the overflow is another 20? So
That was in the original plan. So once they were able to get in and start looking at the site itself. And it's certainly something we can have them take a look at on the end to see if there's any capacity for that.
'Cause there's no overload in the sketches that you have right now.
We have discussed potentially grading out a larger area than the 33 spaces or whatever the final number ends up being, so that you could grass park if there's a bigger event, or eventually accommodate more spots if we were finding that the use was consistently higher.
I want to get a clear answer. The overflow is not in this design. It could be added, is what I'm hearing. So right now it is limited to 33 parking spots.
We aren't really there yet. What we've talked about is when we develop the actual grading plan, at least grading out a wider area than those 33 spots. So you'd have a flat area and how you guide it. Exactly. Yeah. Or, you could do some type of paver, so it's a little more structured. We haven't really gotten to that much detail, but if making sure that there's enough parking long term is a concern or a question that everyone has, we can certainly bring that feedback to Ane Fernandez and at least make sure that from a grading perspective, you could bring a lot in later if need be.
I think it'd be important because the residents want screening. So if you're going to do screening right, you should know exactly how much parking you're screening.
Right, because all the remarks I got, they were asking for 20 parking spots, not more.
Well, and this thing is going to be accessible via bike and walkers and that kind of thing too.
And I think that one of the assumptions that we have made is that a lot of people, from the resident standpoint, is that they will come in through the trail system.
Yeah.
And not drive.
But nobody from the north and northwest can come in because there's no trail.
Yep, at this point in time, yes.
But there will be.
Yep.
At some point.
What decade?
2023?
Do we have any benchmarking from other parks that are sort of like this? I mean, how many visitors does Lowry Nature Center have a year? Do we have some kind of benchmarks like that we can compare it to?
That's certainly a good question and something we can look at. I think, this is significantly different than like the Lowry Nature Center because it doesn't have any specific programming yet, nor real internal or indoor space. But it's certainly something that I can take a look at.
Other people, they also asked about the lighting.
Yep.
And security.
Yeah, so we are continuing to work through that. Ideally, yes, we would minimize the amount of light specifically within the parking lot, and whether it's a dusk to dawn. But lighting has come a long ways now, where a lot of the, you don't have that light spill anymore with the new lighting. It's downcast. And so we're going to have to work through the shelter piece, because I know we had a comment from a gentleman that lived across the lake to make sure that the lights were downcast within the shelter, and whether or not the restrooms are going to be locked or open. So that's something we'll have to, from a operations standpoint, that's something we're going to have to work through.
You're going to have Wi-Fi out there?
I know that was a question that was brought up, so we can certainly look at that as well.
Okay,
all of that.
Just in the beginning.
Yeah, so we're just starting now to get into the deep dive. We've got about another month before we come back to council with 60% plans.
Do we have another open house for the residents?
At this point, no, we don't have one planned.
Can we? So that they can see where we are?
Well, we had what, 10, 12 people that Monday? Is that about
And we have over the past couple of years, we've done a lot of resident contact in just developing the site plan, the original concept plan, and the feedback that we've gotten from not the residents that live directly on the park is that they're happy to go with it. So.
Well, and we have the opportunity to keep this updated on our website and that kind of thing, so residents can go there to see what's been updated, and we are always open for feedback, so.
Okay, all right.
And I know that the district sent out postcards for the open house to pretty much everybody in the Wassermann area. And I know we did a big push on the website, so.
Yeah, we also accessed the Wassermann Lake Association listserv, so everyone in the Lake Association received an email about that open house.
Okay.
One of the things that I would like council to think about is maybe phasing in that boardwalk, once we kind of understand what the engineering is going to be like. And, you know, I know there's opportunity sometimes to get grants and that sort of thing to build those kinds of amenities. I'd like us to think about maybe phasing in that portion of the lake. I know we kind of went from zero, well, we went from 0 to 60 on this park.
Yeah.
So when I originally voted to acquire land, one of the comments I made in that was in fact that I wanted to work grants before we did anything, because none of this was planned for, or there was no money in the bank, so to speak, as far as this cost. Now the cost is going up higher. I think the only realistic way we can do this is we have to take a phased approach, because we simply don't have the cash in the bank. Plus, we've got Marsh Lake Road coming up. We've got trail connections. There's always, we've got the ADA sidewalks we have to deal with downtown. Simply, I just don't think the city has a pot of money set aside for this. And if we're going to, given the other requirements in the city, I think the only way that we can actually go about this is continue to explore grants, and then secondly, break this into phases if possible. The island to me seems like a natural break point to take all of those costs and defer them until such time as we can have plan for this financially, because I really don't want to go and borrow more money. Where the city's already paying 19% of our revenue for debt service. I just don't want to take on more debt if we can avoid it. Yeah, go ahead.
Mayor, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just a quick reminder, as we've been talking about budget, and when we come back to you in November, either the 12th or the 25th, I'm not sure which one, we will be talking about a funding strategy for the construction of this park. Currently, as a placeholder, we have made the assumption based on some previous council discussion that we would be utilizing bonding for this. So, and that's different than the land purchase, which is on your agenda for this evening, where we're using a combination of fund balance, so cash, and then the utility, from the utility fund, the bond proceeds from that. So that is separate from the construction, but right now, just as a reminder, the financial plan currently reflects bonding in the amount of $2.1 million. And Tricia, I think you did some, do you have that number off the top of your head?
It's about an extra 20,000 or 20,000 a year, so I think it was in that 175 to 185 range.
To bond for the 2.5 million, just so
We
you
were going to revisit franchise fees as a means of supporting debt servicing, which was in the neighborhood of 200,000 a year.
That's correct.
As a person that has hung around lakes all my life and had boats and lakes, and if you open this park without being able to get to the lake, that'd be a mistake in my opinion. So to me, if you're going to phase things in, which I don't agree that it's a necessity at this point because the financing is available, I would phase in the shelter and make sure the boardwalk and the fishing dock was out there so people could get to the lake. Otherwise, you're visiting a shelter that's, yes.
One thing you need to realize is we do have a public access to the lake on the other side of
But you need a boat.
The only dock would be off the island, correct?
Yes.
Drive there. So it's just my opinion, but I think it'd be a serious mistake to phase the access to the lake out at this point. And I think we haven't revisited the financing at all because we had talked about the fact that we had access to franchise fees. We had some way to facilitate $200,000 a year in debt servicing.
Right.
And
I think it was in the budget. Yeah.
So, well, I'm open to look.
I don't disagree with the phasing approach, but I agree with Councilmember Vogt. I think the island, the boardwalk, and the island and the fishing pier are just instrumental to this whole park. This is the kind of the, the money shot for the whole park right here. And if we do away with that, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice.
That's fine. I'm open to other ways to phase it. I just don't want to go and borrow that much more money if we can avoid it. I mean, if we can't avoid it, that's a different discussion. But I'm concerned about Marsh Lake Road and the money we have to spend there and the other requirements that weren't planned for, and we're trying to put money away for the trail connections, what also the residents want. Councilmember Vogt, you mentioned earlier that we don't have a trail connection here yet. We don't know when we're going to get it, but that's going to cost us money too. I get concerned that just because we borrow money, and I want to make sure that if we do this, the residents are okay with it because it's going to drive taxes up, and there's not other options. I would rather see if we can take a phased approach, and that phased approach maybe it's not give us everything we want right out of the get-go, but at least this way we minimize the tax burden and minimize the borrowing. But I don't know. We'll have to see what those phases could be. A pavilion may be a better way to look at it. I think the island is a natural cutoff, but I agree with your comment that without the lake access, that kind of puts a crimp on the park itself. So we're not making that decision tonight, correct?
That's correct.
And what I heard you say, and I want to make sure I get this right, you've got plans in there for borrowing $2.1 million now to build the park?
I'm going to look at Tricia just in case she can correct me if I get this wrong. But our financial plan right now in your 2020 budget that we've been working on reflects an assumption that we will bond in 2020 for $2.1 million to pay for the construction of the park. Right now, that is not translating to a property tax increase. How we do that, it could be a property tax increase, it could be to Councilmember Vogt's earlier point, it could be paid for through a change in policy for the utility franchise fees that we're collecting. So the budget does reflect that currently. How that gets funded or translated into where that funding comes from has not been had yet. The bond payments would not start in 2020. That would start in 2021.
Correct. So that's when we would be budgeting, so we would have to make that decision on the financing, how to pay back the debt.
All right. Well, it's still borrowing money though. So, all right. We don't need to sidetrack the discussion. Is there anything else that you need from us, Ann, tonight?
If I may, sorry, Anna.
Like I said, Anna.
So one of the things that we've been talking about and thinking about is the timeline of the boardwalk. So the boardwalk has to be winter construction. As originally proposed, we would have planned to bring the boardwalk construction package with the 60% design, which is going to be in November, and then we would be bidding that for construction this winter. If there is some question about when boardwalk construction is happening, we could possibly push to construction of winter next winter,
2021.
Yes. And we don't have to necessarily make the decision tonight, but we will have to make the decision at the next meeting. So we can continue to work under the assumption that we are going to bid and construct this winter and have that package ready for November. But just so council is aware, there is a pretty limited window on getting that boardwalk in if we want that to be part of this sort of first construction push.
Got it. The next meeting is
November 12th.
All right. Thank you.
And there is some risk too with just the cost increases, so that's important to keep in mind as well.
Yep.
But we'll have more information once we get that bid package too. If we decide to move forward with that, we can always reject the bid if it comes out to be way too much.
All right, council, final comments? Anything? All right, thank you, Anna. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Next item, Kara, this is yours. 7.3 well siting study update. Musical chairs.
need my notes. Alrighty, and our presentation. Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. I feel like I haven't been here in a few meetings, so I felt a little rusty today, so hopefully I remember what I'm doing. The agenda tonight is specifically an update on the well siting study that was first authorized back in February of 2016. So we decided it might be a good idea to revisit some elements to get everybody back on the same page. You weren't all necessarily on the council when this started, but specifically in June of 2019, the City Council authorized borings by Mark J. Trout Wells Incorporated. What we want to cover today is a brief overview of the comp plan, review of area geology, highly riveting topic that will have you all glued to your seats, review of the well siting study, and then just some preliminary findings of the well siting study. We aren't asking for any action tonight, just really to provide you some background and then answer any questions you might have about the background information. We expect that we'll be back at a future meeting, potentially in 2 weeks, if we're ready to get some council direction or action on next steps, but we're not ready with that yet tonight. So just briefly, I'm going to touch base on the comprehensive water system plan, and I will try not to go into great endless detail about the comp water system plan, but the city does have existing wells 2, 3, and 4, which supply water to water treatment plant number 1. You all know where the water treatment plant is located, and wells 2, 3, and 4 are located generally around that water treatment plant. Construction was nearly completed, is nearly complete to what we refer to as well 2.5, which will replace well 2 with the intention of maximizing capacity of water treatment plant 1. So the existing part of the city's water system is built out. As growth extends to the south, additional water supply is needed to serve the growing population. So dating back to the 2030 comp plan, which was finally adopted in 2010, well number 5 was proposed to be located just north of Marsh Lake Road, and wells 6, 7, and 8 on the south side of Marsh Lake Road, along with water treatment plant number 2. Each were identified as needing to have 1,000 GPM or greater located in the Jordan aquifers, suspected to be present and available in this area. This plan in 2030 was consistent with the city's 2002 water system plan. So we've been kind of working towards this build out for the last, I guess, what would be coming up soon enough as 20 years. The 2040 comprehensive plan carried that plan forward. So I just grabbed these graphics that Bar already had in their PowerPoint and moved them to the front just to highlight what we're talking about. So since really dating back to the mid to early 2000s, growth in the city of Victoria has been trending south as opposed to westward. And I would say that the primary reason for that is with the opening of Highway 212 in 2008, it provided an opportunity to have growth occurring in an area with a better transportation network compared to what we were dealing with Highway 5. And of course, the council is aware with the South Area plan that's underway that it's been a strategic priority to get down to the area of 10 and 11 where we have planned additional tax base. So Brian has additional graphics related to the well location, but just wanted to touch on how these wells fit into our future. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian, and he can introduce himself.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council, for having a moment with me tonight to hopefully talk to you about something that's interesting to me, at least, in the geology and wells and hydrogeology that affects your water future. And hopefully what you'll learn tonight are some of the reasons why we suggested several years back that you have a well siting study, and then to give you a little bit of an update of kind of how that's gone And actually what I'm hoping that you'll see tonight is that in fact it was a very good idea that we did this well siting study, and some of the data we've found has in fact given us some new insight into the area and where we would or maybe would not drill some wells. Again, I'm Brian Lamont with Bar Engineering, Vice President there, and also in charge of this project. Other people are working on the primary parts of it, but I have some of the background here. So where we're going to go today, why did you need a well siting study? Talk a little bit about well construction basics, and that is going to play in fairly significantly into why we're doing this, so hopefully you'll bear with me as we go through some of the well construction basics. And then talk a little bit about the aquifers and hydrogeology of the region, and then dive into a closer look at specifically what is present within the city of Victoria, and then give you a quick well siting study overview. So as Kara mentioned, we already had the graphic in here related to the comprehensive plan. And so why did we need a well siting study? First of all, to obtain a sustainable long-term water supply for the city. Obviously, as growth occurs, more demand occurs, and the need for more wells and treated water rises. We want to be able to support that future development, and probably the most significant reason for why we're doing a well siting study with some of the drilling that has been occurring is to manage risk and uncertainty, and hopefully some of the figures that I show shortly will explain that in a little more clear way. And that plays directly into the next item of investing wisely in your capital expenses. So if you don't have good information, you can have a tendency to make some decisions that may not be wise, and you may invest in an area where maybe a well couldn't support the volume of water you thought it was going to be able to support, which is in fact some of the things that we have learned. And then obviously support comprehensive water system planning. So here, bear with me now in well construction basics. Now you're looking at two different concepts of wells, and I think if you don't know much about wells, you might think all wells have well screens. That's not always the case. And the well that's shown on the left is what we would probably think of as some of your traditional wells, a screened well that has a pipe drilled down into the ground vertically until you reach the water-bearing unit that you want to get the water from, and then you drill a little further, put a screen down in there, and then the water actually flows through the aquifer into the screen, which keeps the hole open, and then the pump brings the water up to the surface. And in many cases, those wells can produce a tremendous amount of water if the surrounding aquifer will support that. The well that's shown on the right, however, is a slightly different type of well, and most, for example, if you have a cabin or a single-family home with a well in it, very few single-family homes would have this type of a well in it. It's called an open hole well, and when you do not have a screened option or sand and gravel of sufficient capacity, but you do have bedrock aquifers, you will often move to this type of a well. And so what they'll do is they'll drill that same type of a vertical casing down till you reach bedrock, and then you'll land that casing in bedrock, and then you'll keep drilling down into the bedrock, and sometimes you have to put multiple casings to get to the actual water-bearing unit that you want. When you get to that water-bearing unit, then you'll blast an open hole, actually construct a small cavern under the ground that allows the water to flow into that cavern. In this case, you do not need a screen, and instead the water just flows into that cavern, and then you have the pump down in the casing that pulls the well up. And that's the primary driver of this, because the bedrock unit that we would like to access for your southern region is called the Jordan Aquifer. It's one of the most productive aquifers in the region, one of the most consistent, reliable, known aquifers in the area. But as you're going to see, its presence is not known positively within the city, and I'll get to why. So what you're looking at there now is something that gets geologists and engineers kind of excited. It's a map. It may just look like paint spilled on a floor to you, but it's a map that's showing the Hollandale embayment. And the Hollandale embayment is a geologic term about the area where a former sea existed in this area and deposited sand and whatnot to form the aquifers that we now draw water from today. We're at the upper edge of it. The northernmost area of the Hollandale embayment goes up to about Hinckley, Minnesota, roughly. And then as you'll start to see on some of the upcoming slides, there's Carver County, so you know where you're living in there. That's the edge of the Hollandale embayment. So that as you get just a little bit further to the west, this water-bearing unit is no longer present. And in fact, the aquifers out there are far different than the ones here. They're oftentimes poorer water quality, sometimes related to just little stringers of sediments that you may or may not be able to find, hopefully where some former glacial stream was. But in this area, we have really good, consistent area. Now, you remember I spoke to you about the Jordan Aquifer, which is the most productive aquifer in the region. That's the approximate edge of the Prairie du Chien and Jordan aquifer, that red line that you're seeing there. Now, in order to blast a cavern down into the Jordan aquifer, which is a sandstone, you need to have the presence of the limestone right above it to hold that cavern open. If you do not have the Prairie du Chien, which is a limestone, present, and you only have Jordan, that's just a sandstone. And if you try to construct your cavern in that, it'll just collapse in. It's not very competent, whereas the limestone is much more competent and will actually create kind of a roof over that cavern, holding the open hole open. That's where the city of Victoria is. So you might be saying, well, wait a minute, you don't have any Jordan there. Well, actually, as you zoom in, you'll start to see that, in fact, that is the Jordan aquifer that I mentioned. This is a cross-section. Think of it like a layer cake, and let me go back real quick. That black line that's trending northwest to southeast is where this section is cut. And so this is giving you a rough idea, and it's like a layer cake. That when that ocean was here, the sea was here that I mentioned, the Hollandale embayment, it deposited units over time, and these different units represent different layers in that layer cake. Some of those units have a lot of water in them that moves really well, and then some of them have a lot of shale and clay-like rock that prevents the movement of water, and those create separate aquifers. Now, that's the Jordan aquifer that we're looking for, that we're hoping for. Excuse me, that's the Prairie du Chien aquifer. Pardon me. The blue is the Prairie du Chien, the limestone. The red is the Jordan that we would like to get the water out of. And that's where you guys exist, right there. That's the city of Victoria. And so you can see you're right at that edge. Now, we didn't create these maps by going out and excavating the entire, all the sand off of everything and then looking down there and creating them. They're based on well logs. So wherever a driller put in a well, we do our best to interpret it, and actually, we don't. The Minnesota Geologic Survey does. And then they create a series of maps like this, and so that's your city boundary is on top of that underneath. Again, that pile of paint spilled on the floor, maybe. And there are a number of bedrock aquifers possible. So the top one is called the Quaternary. That's sand and gravel. The Quaternary aquifer is where your wells 2 through 4 are drilled. It is not always present as sand and gravel. Sometimes the Quaternary unit is just solid clay, and you can't get any water out of clay. The aquifer below that is the Prairie du Chien Jordan aquifer. So the Prairie du Chien is, again, that limestone cap over the sandstone Jordan that we're hoping to find here. Deeper and beneath that is the Tunnel City, and way deep down below that is the Mount Simon Hinckley, which is currently restricted by law. The state has decided that we want to kind of keep that as our ace in the hole in case we ever have real problems at the superficial aquifers. We want to be able to drill deep down, so we always have that. So they won't let you drill into that aquifer unless it's kind of like no other hope, no other options. So then why did we do the siting study? Well, again, this is a cross-section, and again, I apologize for how much data there is on this. This is a cross-section taken directly from your county atlas, your geologic atlas. So this is the information we rely on to make some of the initial decisions about where we might try to drill a well. And again, there's approximately where Victoria is. And that is the little lobe we're looking for. According to the geologic atlas, it's present, and it says that there's a Prairie du Chien there and the Jordan beneath it. And then there's the Tunnel City, the deeper aquifer that I referred to, and then finally the Mount Simon. We're not going to be able to drill into the Mount Simon. We'd rather not drill into the Tunnel City because it simply doesn't give us very much water. It costs a lot more to get down there, but regionally it's just a very low producing aquifer. So now you're looking at a close-up of the area where we'd like to put the wells. Excuse me. That kind of reddish blob, that kind of awkward-shaped reddish blob, is where the current mapping suggests that Prairie du Chien is present. In other words, that's that limestone cap that would allow us to drill a hole through there into the Jordan. What we typically know is that whenever the Prairie du Chien is present, the full thickness of the Jordan is present underneath it. In other words, if we hit any limestone, we're going to have at least about 80 to 90, maybe 100 feet of the Jordan, which is what we're aiming at. The problem is when they draw these maps, they draw them based on existing well logs. All those dots on there are different well logs. That's where a well has been drilled, and that information is what was used to create these maps. You can see there's clusters of wells, and where there's clusters of wells, you start to see a lot more bends in the edges of that blob. And where there aren't, you start to see big, long, sweeping curves because they're guessing, they're averaging. And what we have learned in some cases with some of our clients, the hard way, not through our decisions, but their decisions, is that these maps are only as good as the data that went in to make them. And if you see a lot of space between the dots that actually hit the Prairie du Chien, which there's only a few on this, only those green circles are ones that are fairly certain there's Prairie du Chien. So if you see those green circles on there, those are suggesting that there's Prairie du Chien present. You can see there's quite a bit of distance between them, and in fact, that whole arm to the south, there's none. And so this is why we suggest to you that you need to look very specifically in here, because if you are counting on wells down in this southern area to have Prairie du Chien present and have the volume of water you would like to get out of the Jordan, you want to know it's there. And I will tell you, other cities have gone ahead thinking that these maps were accurate enough as they were, put in 16-inch diameter water mains for several miles to a well site that they didn't drill in advance, drilling down and then finding none of those aquifers present. And so that's what we're trying to avoid you doing here, is spending money on infrastructure that wouldn't then produce water that you would like to have. I include these pictures here, these next few pictures, to try to help understand how quickly the conditions can vary beneath ground. Because what you have in all these cases, that Prairie du Chien is the limestone. So what you're looking at there, those limestone cliffs are in fact Prairie du Chien type conditions. The glaciers came back in and the rivers, and they filled in over those areas. And so what we've seen quite commonly actually is you'll drill a well, you'll hit a Prairie du Chien, kind of a remnant of it, and you'll see Prairie du Chien's present. Again, that's that limestone cap over the Jordan. And you'll move over sometimes as little as several hundred feet and find it completely absent. And this is why, because they can form cliffs depending on the historical geology that occurred, whether rivers came through some areas or whether glaciers cleared some stuff out. Again, you can even have pinnacles like this where you'll hit it and then move on any side of it and not find it present. So then you can see the missing data points that I referred to earlier. And then our objective was then to reduce the risk to make sure that the aquifers shown on the county map, whether they were or were not present. Because we'd hate to have you go out, because if you can imagine, if you would go out there and say, okay, we're just going to trust the county map, we're going to go drill this well, and the driller comes out there and you're counting on 1,000, maybe 1,500 gallons a minute from this well, and they get down and they hit the Jordan, but they don't hit the Prairie du Chien, which has happened in other cities as well. They have to then come back to you and say, okay, we need an extra because now we're going to put in a screen. Originally we were going to do an open hole. We're going to put in a screen. That 90 feet of screen ain't cheap. That's fairly expensive. And, oh, by the way, now your well probably won't be 1,000 to 1,500 gallons a minute. It's probably going to be 500 to 800 gallons a minute. So the kind of risk that you have is moving from one well to having to have two wells. And if you didn't know that in advance, you may not have had a developer set aside a site, or you may not have planned for the purchasing of that site. Plus now you're literally spending twice as much money because the cost of that well, in fact, actually is a little bit more. And now you have to put in a second site and you didn't plan for it. And so now you're kind of scrambling fairly quickly to make sure that you have the water that you need. Go back and make sure I touched on all those. So we're going to we want to be able to cite the wells. The use of the Quaternary Aquifer, we've looked around. In other words, you might ask, well, we've got screened wells. Why can't we just put in Quaternary wells down here? The data so far suggests that there aren't the same sand and gravel lumps and blobs and whatnot down in this area, the southern part of the city, as there were in the northern area. Plus, there's always a risk that some of these sand units are not continuous, and they're not very well recharged from the surface. Yeah, I'm sure you probably are aware there's a significant amount of clay on top of a lot of your bedrock down here and on top of the sand and gravel. And so a lot of the rain doesn't percolate back down into that sand very quickly at all. And in fact, Chanhassen had 3 wells that they drilled down into a sand and gravel aquifer. They counted on them for years, and in 2007, during the last fairly dry cycle we had, those 3 wells stopped producing water, and they've had to abandon 2 of them, and they're about ready to considering abandoning the 3rd. And they had to move very quickly to a sprinkling ban and then drilling other wells into a deeper, more reliable aquifer. So one of our objectives in the well siting here was to have, okay, you've got Quaternary wells north. It would be really nice to get you into a different aquifer so you're not relying all on the same, don't have all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. As we walk down through here, this is all of the aquifers that you may or may not have available to you. Again, the Prairie du Chien Jordan, the uncertainty of that's presence is high. use of the tunnel in the Jordan, so the uncertainty is high, but the formation may be present and have a lot of water available. The Tunnel City Wanawak is almost certainly present in your city, but production is low. I mean, we're talking sometimes as little as 400 gallons a minute, 500 gallons a minute, and it's deeper, so it's more expensive. And then if you move down even lower, the Mount Simon Hinckley is not even available because it's restricted by law. And the uncertainty of that one is low, though. You could try to go get a well in there, but they would tell you, no, you have to do exactly what you're doing right now to prove to them that you have to go down into that aquifer before they'd let you get there. There's some, the potential for well interference is medium with your current wells. In other words, if you find Prairie du Chien Jordan present, put some wells in there, you may have some well interference issues that you'll have to address depending on the proximity to other wells in the area. That may raise some cost issues, but the ones that we're aiming at now where we think you're going to find Prairie du Chien Jordan are likely sites that would become part of the city system. I believe they're being sold by developer, right? The developer, or purchased by a developer, excuse me. So there, hopefully the interference won't become an issue there. So then the value of a well siting study: obtain sustainable water, support the future development, manage risk and uncertainty. Seems like we've seen this before. Have I done? All right. So here, phase one was essentially a desktop version. So that gave us the where should we look for sites. That was completed, and we had a final memo in 2017 suggesting phase two. The field data is in progress right now. Phase two is in progress, and we'd suggested 4, 5, or 6 borings. We had a bunch of different sites. 4 borings have been done to date. And the unfortunate thing is every one of them was fairly central to the blob. We tried to put them pretty much in the middle of that Prairie du Chien Jordan blob. Didn't find any Prairie du Chien. We did find Jordan at each location, but we did not find Prairie du Chien, meaning you would be looking at a more expensive well with potentially lower capacity. We're hoping to continue to look and find Prairie du Chien present so that we have that cap over the Jordan. So there is the possibility in the future of needing additional borings, and that's likely what's going to be coming to you next month, is the possibility, because all 4 of the borings we've done so far, we haven't found Prairie du Chien. And again, the difference here is a well that will produce 1,000 to maybe even 1,500 gallons a minute versus a well that may only produce 500 to 800 gallons a minute. So you may be looking at a 2-to-1 type, trade-off if you try to just drill wells where you currently have only Jordan instead of the Prairie du Chien as well. Those were the 4 locations that we've originally proposed the borings. That's the rail line running to the south there. Kara, I don't know if you want to, they understand where that area is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Goshstock and Welter properties.
Yeah. We ended up completing borings at those locations. That southerlymost location, we decided to move north of that in order to expedite things.
Based on the results of what was found at 3, they recommended we relocate 2 up to 5, because based on the data from 1, 4, and 3, 5 made more sense.
And so no Prairie du Chien was present at any of those locations, unfortunately. And so we're estimating that, and it's an estimate, it is possible that you could get more than that in there, but what we've seen is typically once you have to start to screen a Jordan well, it just drops off below 1,000 gallons a minute. And so as you look moving forward, you could decide now, no, we're not going to look for any more sites, and we're going to put in 2 Jordan wells, which is fairly substantial cost, or instead try to look closer to those 2 green dots up to the north where we've seen 30 and 50 feet of Prairie du Chien presence. So continuing to move further to the north to try to find a spot where we can find that Prairie du Chien. And this, we don't know what's between us and them. So maybe Prairie du Chien is present 100 feet north of the last one we drilled, or maybe it's only present within 50 feet of those green circles. So I apologize. I wish I could tell you exactly where it is, but that's the uncertainty based on the data we have in front of us.
And the approximate cost for each boring?
30 to 50 grand. The approximate cost for a well with a well house, 1.5 million to 2 million. So if you put one in the wrong location, you're 1.5 million down the road, on that, and then having to put in a second one as opposed to finding the location that has the Prairie du Chien present. So yeah, we understand that there's a trade-off here, and hopefully I'm providing you with enough information so that you can make an informed decision when this is put in front of you.
We haven't struck oil yet, have we?
No, we're not drilling that deep, no.
And I think I'd just like to reiterate that the comprehensive plan showed 4 wells in this area needed to serve our south growth area. Really our 2040 population projection range is what we were looking at. So, and that assumed 1,000 GPM per well. So at that 500 to 800 range, you're potentially looking at double the number of wells. And at 1.5 million a well, that's not insignificant. Plus you have to connect them all by large diameter water main. So part of what I'm doing on my end is we're just taking a step back. We didn't need to by tonight authorize another boring. So we're just taking a step back on our end to take a look at, should we be looking at something else from a bigger picture perspective relative to the comprehensive water system plan? Should we be looking somewhere else in the growth area? We've initiated some conversation with Chaska about what they have going on in relative to the well siting study that they're about to undertake. So the boring contractor wouldn't be prepared to come back to do a potential boring location back up by the Lennar property for a little bit yet. So we're taking a little bit of time before we decide if we would want to proceed with that or not.
So how soon would this
Where's
happen?
that green dot on the west?
This green dot is at
On the west,
west.
further west, over here, toward the edge of the white, where the white.
Oh, that's the Hunt Club.
Ah, okay.
So right now I've initiated some conversation with Lennar about getting access to their property to do this, what would be 5th boring location, potentially, but haven't finalized anything yet. That's why that's not in front of you yet.
All right, real quick, are these green dots existing wells?
Correct. So,
And are those wells for homes?
Correct.
Which is where that data comes
yeah.
from?
Yep. So this is the Simons property, and this is now the Cronin's property.
And these are 1,000-gallon plus wells?
No, to be clear, these are small private residence type wells, so they're not wells that could be in effect transitioned into becoming city wells.
But
So we don't know what type, whether or not that would work for what we're trying to do, or if it's just a duplication of what we've already drilled. Correct?
Correct. And I know we are reaching out to Mr. Simon to see if we can get any more insight. And we're also going to make contact with Rick Leitner too, who's drilled 1 million wells in the area, to get some information from them.
Real quick, if we talk to Chaska, because there's those 4 green dots to the right, are those also home wells, or are those city
Correct.
wells?
They're all home wells.
These are ours,
Chaska's nearest city well is down County Road 10 a little ways. As I understand it, they're also initiating a well siting study in this same general area, as I understand it, for their next well supply. So I think it's good timing to have some conversations with them, make sure we're sharing data back and forth between us, and then, depending on what we conclude, whether or not we have to look at purchasing water from Chaska from my perspective, all options need to be on the table as we have learned this information to, take a step back and see what makes the most sense for the city.
Certainly at 30 to 50,000 per bore. And which is it, 30 or 50, or is it a crapshoot?
No, it's about, I think the quote from Trout was in here. I think it was 50, was it, yep, right there,
Out of
right
4,
there.
we paid like 188,000
Mm-hmm.
for the 4.
So if the cost of a well is 1.5 to 2 million, we certainly can do a few more borings. If we did 3 or 4 more borings, it's probably prudent.
Yeah, and that's what we're taking a look at still, and I'm not prepared to make that recommendation yet to the city council, but we'll be bringing that back.
One of the things I think we should explore is, this is Carver County as a whole, and not only does this abut Chaska, but Carver as well. So can we do something on what's our word?
Regional?
Joint powers agreement kind of a thing, yeah, where we all get together and say, we're gonna do so many borings and, We know that the more we do, it drives down the cost, right? So can we benefit everybody and kind of look at to something like that? I like your idea. I like your idea of partnering up with Chaska because everybody benefits from the information. So let's figure out how to share the cost of it.
Yeah, and it totally makes sense to talk to Carver too.
Yep, I like that.
And just to be clear, the reason I said 30 to 50 is it depends on when you hit Prairie du Chien or if you don't hit Prairie du Chien. So if you hit Prairie du Chien shallow, it's 30. If you don't and you keep drilling, it's deeper and then it becomes 50. We do have a line item number to allow us to bill only what they actually, the number of linear feet a hole they actually drill.
Yeah, and so to date, it looks like we've spent about $177,000 for the drilling contractor on 4 wells, 4 borings. So in that 30 to 50,000 range.
Is it accurate to say that most of Chaska and Chan have Prairie du Chien?
It's going way, boy, if I can go way back. No, that blue blob right there, well, that doesn't show you exactly where your city limits are. That covers parts of Chaska and city. Those blue blobs are where we expect to see Prairie du Chien. But we're already showing that a significant portion of that lower blue blob does not have Prairie du Chien. So it's not. That's why I was mentioning that those earlier slides that had the edges of the Hollandale embayment and then the edge of the Prairie du Chien. We know out here. So for example, if we were in a city that was right in the middle of the Hollandale embayment, we typically wouldn't go through this type of advanced drilling. We would typically put that into the cost of the actual the first task that the well driller themselves would do. We would bid the well saying, boy, there's like a 99% chance we have, Prairie du Chien here. They would do what they call a pilot boring. They would go down and proof that out, and we would then know, yes, you've got, site conditions are as expected. But usually councils don't, when you have at the opposite end where we're at, that there's a 10 to 40% chance you got Prairie du Chien. Actually, I should say more than about 50% chance. But boy, we're already finding a significant absence of it. So this is, unfortunate, but it's better that we're doing it this way than spending the next 1.5 million for a second well that isn't going to produce nearly as much, instead looking for where we can find the well that'll produce a lot.
So you're going to come back to the council with some recommendations in the next, 30, 60 days?
Yeah, if we decide that it makes sense to do the next boring and we locate that boring, we may recommend both. We may recommend we do the additional boring while we continue to analyze the bigger picture, but I think we'll be back either in 2 weeks or a month.
Got it. All right. Had you wrapped up, or was there more?
I think, yes, that's everything.
Council, any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, roundtable. Kara, can you bring up the shared parking ordinance real quick, please?
Sure.
Sorry.
So I
don't think it is voted.
Feel free to talk while I look.
Yeah, while Kara brings that up, simply what I wanted the council to consider, and if we can find consensus, direct staff. The shared parking ordinance, we know there's language in there that has been used that charges, does 2 things. There's language in there that says there has to be a parking study done, and some of the language in there was rather unusual in the sense that it says a landscape architect, when I last read it at least, a landscape architect can do that parking study, which to me doesn't make sense. But the other thing that's more disturbing is it says $5,000 per parking space, but yet our parking spaces cost us significantly more. So the concern is very simple. While that shared parking ordinance is on the books, it modifies all of the existing parking ordinances. So if we were to remove that, those existing parking ordinances would come back into play. This wouldn't be able to be used. And that's really the question that I have. I think we have the city at risk if we continue to leave this in place without letting developers and the public know that we intend to look at this and change this to either change the fees that are charged. $5,000 is not enough. It doesn't meet with the costs. And it's proven over time that this really hasn't given us any money for parking in the last decade, other than the 2 cases that this council has looked at. So what I want to do is I don't want new developers to come in, look at this, and as long as it's on the books, say, well, we're going to use the shared parking ordinance to determine the number of parking spaces that are required. So I want to basically the council to say, no, we're going to either go ahead and delete this ordinance in its entirety, or put notice out that this is no longer available until such time as at some point in the future the council can look at revising this to bring it up to speed. So I'm not sure if the council has a preference one way or the other. I'm open to either. I just don't want to see it used until such time as we have a better understanding and an ordinance that makes more sense for today's environment and what we're seeing. With that, let me open it up for the council for discussion.
What's your understanding of what would be the parking ordinance if this wasn't in place?
Well, we already have parking ordinances. The shared parking ordinance modifies them, allows them to provide less parking than the ordinances already require by doing a parking study, and they can cut the parking requirements depending on the type of development, and there's different requirements, whether it's commercial or residential. But the shared parking ordinance allows them to any applicant to cut their parking requirements basically in half.
Right. No, I
So as long as it's on the books, it's still available, right? I want to put notice out that this is suspended until such time as either A, the council revises it and brings it up to speed, or B, we strike it entirely and come up with a different alternative. Now, if somebody comes in and if we choose to strike this and somebody comes in and they want a variance from the existing parking ordinance, we'd still have the ability to do that as a council. I just don't want this there as kind of a way to bypass that. I want to force those discussions because of the past history, and $5,000 a parking space doesn't make sense for the city. The taxpayers lose in that particular case. So council?
So do you want to write a new one?
I'm open to whatever the council wants to do. We either have to bring this up to speed and make it so it makes sense for the city, or we kill it entirely, go back to the existing parking ordinances, and then take time to say, okay, the staff hasn't looked at this, so they're going to need time to maybe come back to the council with recommendations. And my concern is, I'm fine with that approach too, but if that, let's say it takes, with everything we've got going on, let's say it takes 6 or 8 months. I don't want to wait that long. I want to at least put it on the record that, okay, this is temporarily suspended, which, Bob, I assume we can do if the council votes to do that?
Mayor, temporarily suspend it?
Correct, so that it couldn't be used?
Or could we?
Mayor and council, I guess, no, you could impose a moratorium on developments that are requiring of parking temporarily.
Oh, that's different though.
Right. So, but is there a way to temporarily make an ordinance not effective without actually repealing it? No, there is not a way to do that.
So the only way to, so we couldn't just say, hey, we're going to review this and this is, all right, so we'd actually have to kill it then to, all right. So, well, council, what do you want to do? Based on that, we either have to kill it or direct staff to come up with another option or leave it in place. Thoughts?
Well, all that seems really extreme. My thought would be, unless we have something to replace this with, we did a pretty extensive parking study last fall. We are just implementing now some of those recommendations from that parking study. We have development underway. All of that has parking within it. I think council still retains the right to have final say. If we feel like the shared parking ordinance, and Bob, this is probably a question to you, if we feel like the shared parking ordinance doesn't meet the requirement, council still has the discretion to say, we're going to impose some other kind of parking requirement. Is that correct?
Well, Mayor and council, as a very general matter, I would say no to that. No, the council doesn't have discretion to sort of say the ordinance on this topic doesn't quite work for our preferences right now, and so we're going to change the result from what the ordinance says. However, in this particular case, I think your shared parking ordinance is meant to create some degree of flexibility for the council, or at least the way it's been applied by prior staff. I've had plenty of conversations with prior planning staff about how to apply this language, and there is certainly some room for interpretation in the language, and I think that gives the city some flexibility. So in general, no, the city can't say our preferences are not borne out by the way the ordinance is written, and so we're going to do something different. In general, we can't do that, but with this ordinance, I think there is a degree of flexibility or interpretation built into the language.
I'm reluctant to I mean, I think this ordinance has actually served us pretty well in the past several years. We have a pinch at the current time. We've got an incredible economy right now, knock on wood. If any of those inputs change, that's impacted. I'm not opposed to taking a look at it, but I am really reluctant to just flush.
I think by killing it, you're putting a sign out in front of Victoria saying, you know, development is going to be development at your own risk. Kind of, we basically know there's a problem, but you know, half the businesses in this city don't think there's a problem. You know, not everybody agrees there's a major parking problem. So, I mean, you got that.
Well, it's not a parking problem, it's a convenience problem.
Well,
I think that's the
convenience
best.
problem.
Right.
But, you know, I say we can't kill it. We should really set up a timetable and have staff look at it. But maybe one of the things you want to consider is the 5,000 is a ridiculous number.
Right.
So as a starting point,
So let me do this.
Make that 10,000 or something.
Right, I mean, it's 10 years old, we haven't updated that number.
Yeah, we could update the
10,000
number.
seems reasonable, and then from there, we could look at looking at the whole ordinance.
So let's do this then. The roundtable, we're not really going to get into long, lengthy discussions. I think there's a consensus here to maybe let's direct staff to go take a look at it, which is what roundtable items are for. And once they look at it, maybe they can come back with some recommendations to the council. Can I get a consensus on that? So we're not going to do anything other than direct staff.
What does look at it, what are they looking at? Dina's got a question.
Go ahead.
So, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just a reminder, our 2020 budget, as we reviewed earlier, does have funding for, and part of the staff work plan is to actually take a deep dive into the parking ordinances. That includes the shared parking. So there is funding in the budget currently proposed to
What's the timeline for that?
hire a consultant. It's in the 2020 budget, so anytime in 2020.
So basically, yeah, we could do it in Q1 if we wanted to.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm fine with that. Then we'll wait until that. Two things, I think there's consensus on. Number one, I don't think we should have a landscape contractor be allowed to do it, so that's one of the things that has to be looked at. And two, the $5,000 cost per space. I think those are the two key points that, when I read through this, that jumped out at me. So Dana, if we can make a note of that and pass that on whenever it gets looked at.
Mayor, members of the council, I was looking down, taking notes, so I didn't see if there was consensus on that.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yep.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you.
What exactly
For those
sounds good?
2 points, look at the 5,000 and look at a landscape contractor being able to do the parking analysis.
And if it wasn't a landscape contractor, who would it be?
I would assume an engineering firm. I don't know why a landscape contractor would be allowed to do a parking study. I can't find that connection.
I don't know.
I think it's a landscape architect.
Landscape
Architect sounds right.
There.
But I, of course, think an engineer.
Well, I agree.
Now all of a sudden, we've just jacked up the prices.
Yeah, we did.
So we have a consensus. Dana, you have what you need?
Just one additional clarification on those 2 points. So the funding piece and looking at which type of professionals are able to perform a parking study. Is that something you're looking for now in
Nope,
2019
I think-
or as part of what we bring back in 2020?
Yep.
2020,
Got it.
right? Q1 2020?
Yep.
Consensus for the council for that timeline?
Yes, 2020.
All right. That takes care of that round table item. Reports. Mr. Vos.
Mayor, nothing, thank you.
Dana.
Nothing from staff, Mayor.
Deb.
No, sir.
Mr. Vogt.
Nothing.
Miss Judy.
Yes. I just wanted to remind everybody that we are going to be doing the yard waste event the end of October weekend and the first weekend in November, 10 to 4. Please make sure that you enter via Highway 5 because we've got it set up so it'll run smoothly. The other thing is I will not be here on Thursday. Apologies, but I have to see clients. So I understand that there will be a recording. I will listen to the recording, and if anyone wants to reach out to me, you can call or email.
Okay, Tom, 2.
Nothing.
Real quick, I went out with Commissioner Workman and Bo Carlson from the Three Rivers Park, and we walked the competition bike trail that's being constructed. It's way back in the woods, and walking through it, it was like, well, this is going to be a lot of fun. So they've got a website. Did we ever get that put out on our city website so people that want information can get to it easily?
I know that
sent that to
Gwen
you.
and I talked about it. I don't know for certain if we pushed. I will check.
Okay, thanks. We'll put the link up on the city website so the people that want to track progress, the city's not going to report it, but there's a website that the people that are building it in Three Rivers Park are doing all of this. They're hoping to have it open. I think their planned date, because of weather, is June of next year. If weather goes well, maybe they can get it a little bit earlier, but boy, I tell you, this is really going to be neat. It's going to be fun when it opens up. So that's a quick update on that. I had nothing else. With that, council, can I get a motion to adjourn?
To adjourn. Second motion.
I've got a second discussion. Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We are adjourned.